Hello and welcome to another episode of the For the Record podcast. I'm joined by Luke yet again to discuss seasons 3 and 4 of Game of Thrones. Now, this is part 2 of a 4-part series where we discuss our thoughts on each quarter of Game of Thrones. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend watching that one first. The link will be in the description for you. So Luke, thank you for joining me for another episode.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so seasons 3 and 4 of Game of Thrones, they're pretty good.
Yeah, they are. That's a bit of an understatement, I'd say.
All right, great podcast. Thanks for coming.
All right.
But no, like in all seriousness, I think these two seasons for me stand out as being two truly special seasons, not just of the Game of Thrones series, but in television as a whole.
I think borderline it was the peak of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, like heading into season 3, we just get a different vibe from those first couple of seasons. You can tell within both of these seasons that the production value has increased significantly. Like the show's got a bigger budget. We're seeing that in the episodes. Like all of the episodes seem to have a lot more attention to detail and care with regards to like the environment, with set pieces. I think this is where the show really finds its feet in terms of like the actors getting to know their characters, the showrunners knowing what works. This is where the show really starts ramping up. Like we both started watching Game of Thrones in this period. I picked up after season 4. I think you were after season 3.
No, I was during season 3. So I watched the first 2 seasons pretty early on in 2013. And then I was watching season 3 as it was airing.
Yeah. So I think I started watching when season 4 was airing or maybe just finished.
Mm-hmm.
This was the time where Game of Thrones was mainstream. Seasons 1 and 2, it was like just a cool HBO show that was starting to get traction. Seasons 3 and 4, through the quality and the bigger budget and that kind of thing, this is where it started to really ramp up and become this behemoth of a television show.
Yeah, it was probably at its most popular there. You could not be not watching it. You know, everyone was talking about it. Every single person.
Yeah, and where like a lot of the issues we had with the first 2 seasons kind of came down to like maybe some of the growing pains with the adaptation, so maybe focusing a bit too much on like some sexy sleazy moments, or the show maybe being a tad bit slow in terms of pacing, and then showing a lot of restraint with regards to not being able to show like set pieces for budgetary reasons, or cutting down on the action sequences, only having like a few per season. It seems that these 2 seasons, they had complete freedom and creative control to realize George R.R. Martin's vision, and genuinely, I don't think we've ever seen a better novel adaptation than in these 2 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Well, obviously, I don't know a lot about the novels or the books. I've never read them myself. I don't think you have either, have you?
I haven't read them, but I've watched a lot of like YouTube videos comparing the books to the series, so I am aware of like the creative decisions they made and what omissions they've made. But in terms of like nailing a high quality TV show, they did that.
Yeah, well, that's like undisputable.
Yeah.
The VFX is amazing, starting from season 3. Like it was pretty okay in season 2.
These 2 seasons, they like everything looks significantly better,
Yeah.
especially the environments. Like King's Landing looks incredible. We get to see so much more of it.
There's so much space.
Yeah.
Like even in just like various places in Bravos and that side of the world, the whole environment around like Dany's like army or people that are around her is so vast and interesting compared to walking around in a desert that looks the same for an entire season.
Exactly. I think those first 2 seasons were held back from those budgetary restraints, but the shackles were freed for these 2 seasons, and it's so much better for it. Like everything across the board, like makeup and costume design, the sets as well, like They traveled all around the world to film Game of Thrones, and these 2 seasons stand out even more with just the sheer variety of different locations. And from like a production value standpoint, this is where Game of Thrones, like right through it to the end of its run, they become behemoth episodes.
They feel like monsters.
Yeah.
Even slower episodes feel incredible.
Yeah. Almost feature film level budgets for certain episodes and stuff. It's really incredible.
If seasons 1 and 2 of Game of Thrones were a plane, they'd be on the runway, and season 3 and 4 is just flying.
That is a good point. But let's kick things off with season 3. So one big noticeable change from season 2, like season 2 is very much a setup season. Season 1 and 2 lay a lot of the pavement. This is where the house is getting built now. And season 3, right from the get-go, picks up where season 2 left off. And with a lot of that foundation being laid, really flourishes in giving us some incredible like characterization, some tension between like what's going to happen with all of the various different story arcs. I think season 3 might be the most consistent season of television in Game of Thrones.
It's probably my favorite season.
Yeah, well, look, it's definitely up there for me. I think it's a fantastic season for sure. And one thing it does really well is just balancing that ensemble.
Yeah.
We already have so many established characters, but they also introduce new characters as well. Not necessarily introduce, but show us existing characters such as Marjorie, and really focusing on making her flourish as a character.
Yeah.
And like let's start with her. So Elena and Marjorie Tyrell.
Yeah.
Two incredible incorporations to the Game of Thrones. They spice up the King's Landing dynamic so well, I think. Marjorie in particular is one of my favorite characters. She's one of the few characters that plays the game well and is morally okay. like generally the ones that are succeeding, right, or playing the game well, they're a little questionable morally. But Marjorie, I think, even though she definitely has like selfish intentions, she would genuinely be a good queen, and she's a good positive character in this cesspool that is King's Landing.
Yeah, and you can see that from her as well when she's like walking around King's Landing, and like she could act like she's putting on a front and doing these like things like visiting the slums and stuff like that to put on a face and show people she is, but she's actually doing these things like no matter what, she's in there amongst the people, she's getting mud on her dress, you know, she's unlike anyone else that we've seen, so it feels like her intentions are pure.
Yeah, and she knows what she's doing. Like, she did that right from the get-go. She's been well tutored by her grandmother, Elena Tyrell. Her winning over the people makes her likable from the people, and that gives her a bit of power over Joffrey. And then I also like the dynamic that she has with Joffrey, because he's been established as someone that no one can control. The only really people that can kind of rein him in a little bit is Tywin Lannister and Tyrion when he slaps him.
Fair. Yep.
But Marjorie kind of comes in and she has this completely different approach. She reins Joffrey in better than any other character has. We see like a softer side of him a little bit. Obviously, he's still Joffrey,
but he's being almost manipulated by Marjorie, and he doesn't even know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And that's brilliant. Marjorie's whole dynamic in season 3 in particular is just really, really strong. I like that a lot. It's where we kind of get to see like that kind of political Game of Thrones play out in a different kind of way, right? It's not like this backstabbing, conniving stuff. It's her using her womanly charm and really showing like what a queen can be, and her kind of sinking her claws and playing the game smartly. And I really, really like that.
Just touching on Elena as well, I really enjoyed her perhaps even a little bit more than Marjorie in this season, because she's just a bit of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Like, she has played the game before, she still knows how to play the game, but her general attitude is just so blasé and to the point, and it's so nice having someone just speak plainly with you in conversations with Marjorie, in conversations with Tyrion, with Tywin, with Sansa.
The Tywin conversations in particular, every time those two are in a room together, is incredible.
She doesn't take shit.
Yeah.
You know, and she's not afraid to say what she's thinking no matter what, but she's still playing the game and she still knows what to do.
Potentially my favorite grandma of all time.
Definitely my favorite grandma.
But yeah, she's a fantastic character. Genuinely one of the best written characters as well. Like,
for sure.
Every line of dialogue so perfectly played by the actress. I'm not too sure of her name, but yeah, she's a real standout. And all of the King's Landing stuff, it's maybe takes a bit of a step back from season 2 in terms of like screen time. You know, we have other arcs that kind of come up a little bit, and some of the major players aren't in King's Landing at this time. Every scene we do get in King's Landing, it just seems like a masterclass of writing and dialogue.
There's a lot of parallels between, I think, Marjorie and Sansa Stark. You can see like the journey, like coming to King's Landing from a different place, and how Sansa reacted to everything, and then how Marjorie's handling it.
Yeah.
And then the interactions they have together and talking about that. You can see that Marjorie knows what she's doing and how she's able to handle things, because Elena has taught her her whole life that this is what she needs to be doing.
Yeah.
Whereas Sansa was just a girl.
Exactly. Sansa was too young, way out of her depth, and kind of mirrors her father, right? She's completely naive to the King's Landing world, whereas Marjorie is the best option to try and rein in Joffrey. Like, she's probably the only person that could do it in Westeros.
Marjorie for queen.
After having a really big season 2 with Tyrion, he's maybe not as prominent in season 3, but I really like how they kind of continue on from season 2. Like, he has that big moment with defending King's Landing, and Tywin comes in. He's no longer Hand of the King now, and he gets the big scar on his face. A lot of that kind of stuff I'm a big fan of. Like, even though Tyrion has a lot less to do and a lot less kind of relevance with the plot, his conversations with the various King's Landing people, right? You've got the conflict with Cersei, you've got the conflict with his father Tywin, the new players of Marjorie spicing things up as well. But then you get a lot of that like fun humor and fun scenes with Bronn and Podrick. I think season 3 and season 4 as well, but season 3 in particular might be one of the best balances of comedy in the entire series.
Yeah, it's comedically, it pays off like a lot of the stuff with Bronn and Pod.
Yeah, every scene they're in is so entertaining. And I think that Game of Thrones has a tricky relationship with comedy and balancing it.
For sure.
Season 3 might be the best execution of the comedy. Like, it is, like, Game of Thrones is genuinely like a hilarious show.
Well, that earlier stuff specifically.
Yeah.
Like seasons 1 and 2, there were a few genuinely funny moments, but it feels like they really kind of found their stride and their balance with season 3.
Yeah. They knew, like, they never overplayed their hand. It was really witty comedy. Character comedy. Like, you have some really nice moments with like Podrick and Bronn. I'm not too sure whether it was season 3, but you have like Podrick with the magic dick, and
I think that was season 3.
And that whole interaction where they're both absolutely flabbergasted that the prostitutes didn't make him pay. I love that. Some of the moments with Littlefinger too are quite funny as well. But yeah, in terms of comedy, I think it's where the writers really found their stride, and I think George R. R. Martin being a showrunner, it's important pointing out that he's only a showrunner for these 2 seasons, and then he steps away after season 4.
Yeah.
And I think just having him there at the helm, like, everything just seems to have that ultra high quality of polish, you know, like, it seems we're getting the best of his dialogue and we're getting the best of his writing in these 2 seasons. And I don't know, everything just feels extremely flawless and polished with regards to balancing drama, balancing comedy, the way scenes play out, right? Like, with the beginning, middle, and end, everything just seems to come together in this perfect storm. Yeah. And I think season 3 is just a great exponent of that.
Everything's balanced, you know, it peaks because everything is so well balanced and laid out in every episode.
Bringing up comedy, like, there's also some dark comedy that's really well done. Let's talk about poor old Theon Greyjoy, because Theon is a character who, like, season 1, season 2, he's not likable, right? I guess we kind of like him a little bit when he's introduced. We kind of see him as one of the Stark boys, and then we get that revelation about, like, you know, tell us how you really feel, Theon, because he hates the Starks, and that's kind of shocking because we expect him to, you know, feel love for the Starks. We are introduced to them as being like they're a great family. So to have his perspective be totally different to the audience's, it's quite interesting. You know, season 2, he kind of like tries to take over Winterfell, yeah, and then season 3 is where he gets captured by Ramsay.
His comeuppance for that,
and thus begins the transformation from Theon to Reek. And honestly, like, some of the hardest scenes to watch, and I love how much they string it out. Right, it's not just like one episode where he gets like tortured, and then they just move on from it, right?
No, it's extended. They want you to know that Theon fucked up and he's going to pay for it.
Exactly. And it's not just one episode, it's not 2 episodes. They stretch that shit out. Like, it is rough viewing. It is really rough. Like, obviously, he starts off, Ramsay just fucks with him, right?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're being tortured watching some of the manipulation that Ramsay
Exactly. Well, he starts off by pretending that he is just a servant there or whatever. And then he helps Theon escape just to capture him again. After that, we obviously have the trick that he plays on him with sending in 2 prostitutes and then removing his penis afterwards. And then after that, we have him eating a sausage in front of him, and obviously some of like the dark comedy there. And like I mentioned before with the comedy, I think Ramsay is like a perfectly executed character.
Yeah.
In terms of finding that balance between being comedy but not going too far with it, and giving us some of that really dark humor, but also just being like a really evil like villain, right? Like, he's arguably the most evil person in the Game of Thrones universe.
Well, that's what they're trying to do. You know, when they introduce Ramsay, they're trying to take a little bit of attention away from Joffrey, who's been a lot of hate and has been like a really like tyrannical villain for the first 2 seasons. And they're trying to put some of it onto Ramsay. And we've heard of him before. We know that Roose Bolton mentioned his bastard of the Dreadfort. The way they introduce him, with making us think he's a servant and he's not really in charge, and then having him track Theon down and actually be the man, the head honcho, and then all of the games he's playing with Theon, is a very interesting way to bring him into the show.
And what's brilliant with it is the writers have taken a character who has done bad things and the audience no longer likes, and they put him through so much with an even more evil character, like the most cynical, evil, vile character you can possibly imagine, and in turn it makes Theon sympathetic. And I really like that. Like every scene that those two share is super rough but really well executed. Like I can understand how some people might not like it, might find it a bit like torture porn or whatever.
Too much.
But I personally vibed with it a lot, and I especially love that really slow, gradual transformation where he just wears him down, and when Theon utterly breaks, and then we have his sister like come and rescue him, and he doesn't want to go, he's too scared. Like that is like this is a highborn kind of character that's just been completely and utterly destroyed by Ramsay psychologically, and it really like sets Ramsay up and shows like A, what he's capable of, and B, sets him up for future seasons as being this antagonistic force,
someone not to be fucked with.
Exactly.
At the end of season 2, with everything that Theon does, you hate him. You know, you don't really want anything good to happen to him. And when Ramsay captures him and starts torturing him, you're there. I was there. You know, I was like, yeah, fuck Theon. Like, absolutely, he deserves this. The way they do it and the way it drags out throughout the season, like you said, it's very sympathetic. I started like feeling sorry for Theon, even though I hated him at the start of last season, and I love the way that they did that to us. And I feel like a lot of people had that kind of opinion about it as well, where you end up feeling sympathetic and sorry for Reek to the point where it goes way beyond that, and you're like, just kill him, please.
And I think lesser writers would probably rush that, but the fact that they really drew this out over like a season made it work. I think it's something that if you just dedicated like an episode or 2 to it, it just doesn't work.
It's when Game of Thrones wasn't too afraid to take its time. But like we were talking about before, it's got that balance that it's not too long, it's not too short though either. It's the perfect amount to make you feel exactly what they intended.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Arya. As I mentioned, like she was one of my favorite characters from the first 2 seasons. I think out of all of the child characters, she's by far the strongest, really well acted, and I just was engaged with her every time she was on screen. Season 3, we see her come across the Brotherhood without banners, and then she ends up with the Hound. I really like that. I think the Brotherhood without banners is like the first time we're really heavily introduced to the concept of like reincarnation and some of the more like magical fantasy elements of this fantasy show.
It's that mystical belief kind of element that we haven't gotten a lot of, apart from the dumb shit in Karth in season 2 with that weird warlock guy.
And it's incredibly memorable. Like I remember that scene where the Hound takes on, what's the name of that guy?
That's Beric Dondarrion.
Beric Dondarrion.
So he's been recast. He was a different person. We saw him a little bit in season 1. Ned sent him out to go and find the mountain, and then he's come back now. He's got a different vibe to him. He's obviously been through a lot of shit because he's cut up. He's got scars all over his body. He's missing an eye, and we do get to see exactly why he is like that in the episode where they're introduced, when the Hound comes and they have that massive fight in the cave, flaming swords, fire, and Beric gets absolutely cut in half. And we're like, well, that was a fun introduction for that character, bringing him back. But we see that mysticism and that magical element. Thoros of Myr, he literally prays to the Lord of Light, and he's able to bring Beric back, and we get to see that happen right before our eyes. And it's some of the craziest shit that we've seen in Game of Thrones thus far.
I think too, that whole sequence, even though it's kind of short, I think it only takes place over like 1 episode.
Yeah, it's a quick fight.
It's honestly one of the most memorable sequences in all of Game of Thrones, because I remember that every single season from then onwards, because they set up so much. They set up like obviously the idea that someone can be reincarnated, and like Beric is going to be like, oh, holy shit, this is a really important character. Obviously, the Lord of Light has been already introduced in like season 2, but we really get more of that. Melisandre coming as well. Gendry getting like sold off to Melisandre as well.
Yeah, well, they set up the Brotherhood. They're quite likable. They've got charisma with them. As that cool archer guy, you know, Thoros is a drunk and he's kind of like comedic as well. And Beric has a sense of honor to him.
Fiery swords.
Yep, fiery swords, cool as shit, also magical.
Yep.
They set them up really well, only to have them be really about money. Yeah. At the end of it, is what they kind of make us think when they sell off Gendry.
It's a cool little side faction though, and I just love the amount of setup that they do in this little episode, right? That has weight for like future seasons. Obviously, like the fire sword being pretty important when fighting the dead, reincarnation, which foreshadows another big event later on, and all of that. But importantly, it's when Arya and the Hound begin their journey, and I love it when these two characters are together. And
it's probably the best stuff for Arya.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the peak of her character. They have such a cool dynamic, right, where it's like a father-daughter dynamic in all of the worst ways. Arya does not like the Hound. She would probably kill him if she had the chance to.
Well, he's on her list.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict there. You have the Hound who, he's kind of, after running away from King's Landing, he's looking for a purpose. And he sees getting Arya to her family, the Starks, to Robb. That's his new purpose. And even though he puts on like a real gruff front, deep down somewhere inside of him, he does care about Arya, especially as the episodes progress and they get closer.
Well, yeah, they grow to that point for sure, because in their backstory, the Hound has been just a loyal dog of the king, and he ended up killing Arya's friend, the baker's boy, or the butcher's boy, in season 1.
Yeah, the butcher's boy.
Yeah, and that is why Arya hates him.
Yep.
But we see through them protecting each other and teaching each other and learning from each other, they start to grow a lot closer. They kind of go really well. They're a good pair.
Yep.
You know, she learns things from him. She has quite a dark kind of personality now in the place that she's in within the show. And he is the perfect character to teach her and lead her through this part of
exactly. Like the Hound rubs off on her. Yeah. In terms of like that cynicism, right? And that,
whether she wants it to or not.
Yeah. Ultimately, it makes her more independent in future seasons. Though we might not get that payoff, it's really important to her arc, right? Her relationship with the Hound does a lot for her character. It's just like a purpose for the Hound. I think seasons 3 and 4 are like when the Hound is at his best.
Yeah.
And
it really humanizes him.
Yeah.
Like we have a few moments with him in the earlier seasons, but there's a lot more development for him in these seasons, which makes him a fan favorite for a lot of people.
Yeah, and even though it might not get like a ton of screen time, like seasons 3 and 4, I don't know, it seems to be where Game of Thrones is maybe at its most complicated in terms of so many different story arcs. Like it's just absolutely insane.
Like you said, that ensemble balancing.
Yeah, like there's so much going on. I think they balance it really well, because even though like the screen time for Arya and the Hound might not be overly crazy, it's just quality. Every time they have a scene together, it's a fantastic scene.
Never mad about it.
Yeah, there's never filler between these two characters, or most of the arcs in these 2 seasons. Let's talk about Bran, because
who?
Yeah, well, Bran's someone we barely touched on in the last episode in seasons 1 and 2, because outside of his kind of accident in the pilot, he doesn't really have any relevance to the plot. I think he has like maybe a couple of cool scenes, like when he escapes Winterfell in season 2, or in season 1 where he has that conversation with like Maester Luwin, I think, where when he's stuck in bed recovering, you know, from becoming like losing his ability to walk. But outside of like a few scenes, he's really not that interesting. Seasons 3 and 4, he does improve a little bit. I guess he gets a bit of a journey, right? Like they want to head north of the wall and find the 3-eyed raven, right? It gives him something to do, but I have to say in season 3 and 4, like compared to the rest of it, it's probably a slight weak point for me.
Yeah.
I don't know, he's just not that interesting of a character to me. There's potential there, right? Like he's a very adventurous young boy who gets pushed out of a window. Can't recall what happens, but like that's a big thing to happen, right? Was meant to follow in the footsteps of like his brother Robb, but that's been taken away from him. But then there's the potential of like a new purpose that gets alluded to. Every time I got like a Bran scene, I was just like, okay, can you take me back to the better arcs?
There's some good stuff with Bran this season. Like, I will admit and agree with you there that some of the stuff with him is not as strong as other parts of the show, but we start learning more about Bran in this season and what he can do.
They care about him in these 2 seasons more than they did in the first
entire
2.
show. Yeah. We spent like 3 episodes asleep in the first season, but in season 3, I believe we get a name for what he has. We understand that he's a warg, which is some kind of another magical ability where he gets to control the mind of animals or simple-minded humans such as Hodor. It has a lot of implications for what could happen in the future, but he starts having more visions as well that kind of allude to a greater purpose for him, and it gives Bran something to do. Really.
Yeah, look, I agree. These 2 seasons are like probably where Bran's arc is at its strongest. In saying that, even Bran at his strongest is still weaker
than most of the others. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem I have with it. I do enjoy their journey like north. It feels like a real struggle. I like the walking elements and seeing like the wolf, the dire wolf, like in action a fair bit.
And it looked good too visually.
Yeah, and Hodor as well, fan favorite character. So there were elements to like, it feels a bit more like setup, and we never end up getting that payoff, but it feels like
not
a bit
really.
more. We get that setup. The journey and the struggle is quite interesting, but like again, it's probably one of the weaker elements of these 2 seasons, I think.
I think one of the main problems with Bran's arc, and when we cut to his kind of story, is Bran is one of the only interesting characters in that small ensemble. You know, we have Hodor, but he doesn't really offer much in terms of being a character, apart from being a plot device and literally a travel device. You've got Osha, a wildling, who should have a decent setup, but you don't care that much for.
No.
Rickon, who's too young to be any kind of character in his own right. And then we've got Mira and Jojen, who are the kids of one of Ned Stark's friends, good friends and companions. But they're kind of just boring as shit.
They don't land.
Not at all.
They fail with the execution. I think that's where it really struggles. Like if we had an interesting character, someone like a Hound, for example,
exactly,
with them, it would make it so much better. But every time we cut to them, it's just like Bran and a bunch of characters we don't really care about, and
so it gives less interest when you cut to Bran.
Exactly, and what's happening like on paper is somewhat interesting. Like Bran being a warg gives his character purpose, huge implications for the future of the show. Them heading beyond the wall, like I personally, every time there's scenes beyond the wall, I'm intrigued. I really like it. So different to the rest of Westeros, right? And it really leans into like that fantastical element. On paper, it should be good. I just don't think they quite nailed the execution.
That's fair.
For Bran's arc. But let's talk about Dany, because season 1, Dany's best arc in my opinion. She's fantastic. Really like one of the standouts of the show. Season 2, she falls off a cliff
completely
and gets stranded in the desert. Like her arc in season 2 is one of the worst elements of season 2. Season 3, things pick up again, slowly, I would say. We slowly get to see her begin that task of building an army. That's where we get the stuff with like the Unsullied and how she acquires them.
Such a memorable scene as well, just by the way. Like the whole Unsullied as a plot point and as an army is incredibly cool. The introduction of them and the slave masters are incredible. And then, of course, how she gets them.
And it feels like we're moving somewhere in season 3 with her. Like season 2, she's just treading water. But season 3, it's like, okay, we're introducing these elements of like where, because she was essentially a slave, she feels a lot of sympathy towards slavery as an idea and wants to abolish it. And seasons 3 and 4 is really bringing out that kind of conflict of interest where she's like, okay, she's going around to these different places and conquering them and building her army and becoming a stronger force, which is really important because ultimately her end goal is to take that Iron Throne.
Sure.
Right. So every story arc we get where she goes to a new place and takes over and gets resources and builds her army and builds her strength, and in turn learns how to be a ruler as well. At least it's an improvement from season 2, I think.
I
think Emilia Clarke's acting dials up. I think season 2 was like a pretty rough performance from her. Season 3 and 4 is probably where she hits her strides again, like she did in season 1. I'm not the biggest fan of Emilia Clarke. I actually think she was slightly miscast as Dany. She works a lot better in season 1, where she's kind of like an innocent child trying to find her feet, or when she just tries to become this like badass ruler. I find parts of her performance to be a little problematic. In saying that, it's probably a lot better in these 2 seasons than it is in the latter half of Game of Thrones.
Well, look,
what do you think of her performance?
Her performance, I think, is fine for the most part. Like, I think when she was complimentary with Khal Drogo and she was kind of finding her feet in the first season, it was probably when she was at her best as well. I agree with that. But season 3 shows her transition into trying to be the ruler and queen type.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think it hits in a lot of areas.
Where are my dragons?
Okay, look, that was season 2. Come on, that was earlier on. She wasn't the best there. Season 3, she's trying to be a badass. She's trying to be subtle. You can see that she put the work in. She speaks it's Valyrian so well, and she does a lot of it this season.
It's fantastic.
Like, there's a lot of language, like
hard thing to do. Right?
Yeah, and she's really good at it. And there's some awesome moments earlier on in season 3, and it's probably some of my favorite Dany stuff throughout the whole show, where she showcases that power and that Dracarys for the first time, and you see how scary she can be. But I think one of my biggest issues with Dany's arc, starting from season 3 and 4, is it's the beginning of a massive side plot for Dany. It's like she starts doing side quests here.
It does feel like a video game side quest.
Yeah, you know, so her ultimate goal is retake Westeros, as the Targaryens have had for many years, and capture the Iron Throne. Beginning in season 3, of course she's amassing ships, she's amassing an army, but she begins caring about conquering all of the cities east of.
She gets distracted.
She gets super distracted, and it becomes such a massive plot point for her. You're like, okay, great, I love seeing this stuff, but when the fuck is she going to focus on doing what she was doing? How many cities can you capture and fall and have to recapture before you start focusing on actually going to Westeros? And it kind of feels like they were just meandering a bit around that. Obviously, a lot better than season 2, the Karth stuff, where nothing at all was happening. She's at least doing something that could pay off later on, and she meets some interesting characters for her and her character development, like Daario Naharis.
The scenes with Daario fucking slap. Like that introductory.
Well, the first Daario.
That introductory scene where he just rocks up and throws the heads of those other people that were going to kill her is fucking badass. And then
Grey Worm as well.
Yes, Grey Worm, such a uninteresting character, genuinely. But he's all right. Like, a lot of the things that are happening in season 3, they're good. But I think season 3 is still a little finding its feet. It's like, okay, season 1 starts so strong. Season 2, we fall off a cliff. Season 3, we're building back up again. The Unsullied stuff is cool, and really, for me, the appeal of Dany's arc is just seeing like a different side of Westeros. True. Right? It feels like a foreign country. And it's so different to the rest of what's happening. So I think it's always just like a bit of a nice break from some of the other arcs.
But look at what we get with Dany in this season compared to some of the later ones where she's doing that stuff. It still feels fresh that she's doing this and starting to act like a queen. Obviously, it does meander and become a bit of a side quest later on. But that initial, I think it's in one of the first 3 episodes of season 3, where she gets the Unsullied, she reveals that she understood the whole time what that slaver, that master, was saying when she speaks Valyrian, and he's like, oh shit. And then she's like, I am going to just kill you and all of these people. I'm going to take these Unsullied, and you should be lucky, you know, that I even graced you with my presence. It feels like a really dark moment for her, but it's also really badass, and it feels like she's taking her strides back. But for the first time, we get to see her utilize her dragons in a way that is really powerful. It shows us that nuclear weapon aspect of her dragons. They're a lot bigger, they're a lot scarier, and they look a lot better too.
It's the first time we can really start to create an image in our heads as an audience of her actually being like the ruler of Westeros. It's the first time we get to see that. And it's like, okay, she is a bit of a badass, she has what it takes. And it's important for our arc as well. Let's move on to Jon, because Jon, season 3 and 4, but particularly season 3 is a standout for him. Again, like Dany, like, I think his season 1 stuff's extremely strong. There's a lot of like internal struggle, and then him ultimately like making that decision to not abandon
the Night's Watch.
The Night's Watch when Ned is killed. Season 2 is a little slower, right, for Jon, but a lot of setup, and season 3 and 4 as well both get a lot of rewards from that setup. I personally am a huge fan of everything that happens in season 3 with Jon. The dynamic with Ygritte is incredible. They have so much chemistry. Like, no wonder the 2 actors end up getting married, because every time they share a scene, like the fucking chemistry is palpable. It feels like I could light a match and it would just ignite the room, right? Every time they interact. And it's a genuinely good like love story, because you have Jon, who's like, they're total opposites, right?
This virgin boy.
Yeah, he's a virgin and wants to maintain that because of his oath to the Night's Watch, and that he's a very honorable character. And Ygritte is this wildling with just a completely different background and persona. And these 2 opposites come together, and it works. Like, the flirting between them, the chemistry is fantastic. You have that moment where like she's his prisoner, then he's her prisoner, and then they run away and have that like moment in the cave. It's genuinely like one of the better romances in Game of Thrones. I think their romances are a bit hit or miss, but this one was a romance I genuinely cared about. And Ygritte is such a fantastic character. Like, the actress that portrayed her, so much personality. Really, like, what isn't a lot of screen time? She's really only in seasons 2 through 4. She makes her mark on the show. Like, her impact.
She makes a mark on Jon.
Exactly.
Sure.
Huge moment for Jon in terms of his character development. And then it also just gives us so much interesting stuff where we kind of, like, we already got the Night's Watch stuff, right? We're used to that. We've been established to that. We're getting the wildling stuff, the interactions with Mance Rayder, the implications that this could potentially have for the war later on, right? Like, it's really interesting learning about the wildlings. And
well, up until season 3, we hear about the wildlings as this kind of like crazy primitive people living beyond the wall and stuff like that. It's not until season 3, we meet a few of them in season 2, but it's not until season 3 that we really start to learn more about them, and it kind of humanizes them as a character. They start calling them the free folk for the first time, and through Jon's eyes, we get to experience the way that they live and what they believe and how they are as people. And you're like, hey, they're not so bad.
Yeah.
You know, through their romance, like Ygritte and things like that. But Jon essentially becomes a wildling in this season. He's playing a part to try and survive and get back to the Night's Watch. But there are moments where you don't know if he is actually falling for the life that he's living as a wildling. Like, he appreciates how free he is and how they live their life, because it's so different from everything he has ever known. And it's such a fresh take for his character.
I love it because
Me too.
I genuinely didn't know, like, is he just going to leave the Night's Watch and stay with the wildlings? Is he going to betray the wildlings? What's going to happen with Ygritte? And then obviously it foreshadows like a lot of his leadership credentials as well, like him wanting to bring the Night's Watch and the wildlings together and have peace and that kind of thing. So much good setup. Every scene that like happens beyond the wall is fantastic, and we get introduced to a little favorite character of mine with a red beard, Tormund. I love that man.
Tormund's beautiful. He's a great character. He's also comedic, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And he adds to that for season 3 just based on how he is and how he acts. But for sure, he's a fan favorite, and he definitely has a lot of good payoff later on as well.
Absolutely.
Another person I want to talk about just beyond the wall is Mance Rayder. The King Beyond the Wall. He is not at all what I expected him to be. Obviously, we don't hear a lot about him, but he was a member of the Night's Watch who went beyond the wall, learned their ways just like Jon did, and became the King Beyond the Wall. He united all of the free folk clans and created this massive army to try and finally get some justice for the wildlings who were cut off from the rest of Westeros. And he's such an interesting, charismatic and likable guy. You know, he feels like he has a lot of honor to him. You really feel the passion for what he believes. And there's a lot of parallels and similarities between him and Jon's journey.
Absolutely.
That kind of feel like he's almost a mentor for Jon in this way.
Yeah, and their conversations and a lot of that dynamic too just brings so much to the world building of Game of Thrones. Like, this is a whole element of the show that kind of gets overlooked a bit, is just how much like history and thought has gone into this world. And I personally really enjoy like all of the stuff beyond the wall and that kind of like world building on like the history between the Night's Watch and the wildlings and everything like that really works for me. So I think it's a real highlight of season 3. But another highlight of season 3 is actually Sam and Gilly's relationship. So it kind of parallels Jon's and Ygritte's relationship slightly. So Sam is just one of my favorite characters. He's just like such an innocent, sweet character who doesn't fit in this world at all. Where in like the first 2 seasons, he's kind of like this useless comedic relief. Season 3, he actually, you know, starts to kind of get a bit more relevance and importance to the show. I really like his relationship with Gilly. I think it's super sweet, and it's just like a nice breakaway from the rest of Game of Thrones, right? It feels like its own thing. The big moment at the end of season 3, Sam is the first person in thousands of years to kill a White Walker. That set up and payoff with like them finding the dragon glass and Sam having this desperate moment at Craster's Keep to defend Gilly, and how he's brave in that moment, right? Like he's seen as like a coward, but he's brave in that moment, and he's the one to discover that dragon glass is the key to defeating the White Walkers, which is super important to the rest of the show, but just such a fucking incredible moment for a character like Sam to have. It's
cool. It's incredible because they set up the White Walkers, especially the actual lieutenants and stuff like that, as this unkillable, undead, incredibly powerful force. And to see for the first time that dragon glass that they discovered in season 2 have that massive payoff to literally shatter the walker to pieces, it's crazy. It's daunting as a moment. You like your jaw drops as you watch that happen.
and like hilarious reactions all around, both from Sam and like the White Walker when it realizes it's
that he's dying.
Yeah, I liked a lot of the stuff beyond the wall. I think season 3 really strong in that regard. The best parts of season 3 for me, we have to talk about Jamie and Brienne.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Jamie goes from a Prince Charming villain kind of character to one of the best characters in the entire show throughout the duration of season 3.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
He goes through shit. So obviously season 1, he's that villain, badass, kind of daddy's boy, trust fund kind of kid.
Yeah.
That Prince Charming, like you were saying.
Good at everything.
Yeah. Season 2, he is in the, he's captured, I believe, in the Stark camp for the majority of season 2.
Yep.
And then season 3, you've got Catelyn asking Brienne to take Jamie back to his family.
Yep.
And that is really interesting for Brienne as a character, but for Catelyn to have done that. But we get something that we don't expect in the relationship between Brienne and Jamie as they're traveling. That is some of the best moments of the show in the entire run, the entire series.
If you told me after watching season 2 that these two characters would come together and be the best parts of an entire season of Game of Thrones, I would have laughed at you. Like, Brienne is an uninteresting character in season 2. Like, she has cool moments, I guess, but not a ton of depth. She just like seems like a body, you know, like this strong female warrior who wants to protect people, and that's about as far as her development goes. And Jamie being this, he was kind of interesting and engaging, but didn't really see a ton of depth with him in those first couple of seasons, right? Like, he fucks his sister, he betrayed Ned, like he's the one who pushed Bran out the window. Like, he's kind of a dislikable character. Season 3, everything changes, and I think the catalyst of all that is one of the most shocking moments in Game of Thrones. I mean, there's so many, right? You can literally like count 20 crazy shocking moments, but that moment where Jamie loses his hand is because it's still like that reaction, the way it's executed. Like, they have that tension, right, between these group of men, how they want to enact revenge, and Brienne's trying to like protect him a bit. We feel like we're gonna get over it, and he's gonna be okay. Like, nothing's gonna happen. Then out of nowhere, like the leader guy just like is like,
Locke
nah.
is his name.
Yeah, he's just like, fuck it, and hacks off his right hand. Like, that's an important hand for any man, especially the best swordsman in all of Westeros.
Yeah.
And fuck, like, to end an episode like that, it's brutal. The way it's shot, the way we see his hand just like separate from his arm.
It looks great.
It looks gross. It's fantastic, and Jamie's reaction, and it feels like, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Jamie at this point in time of the story, it feels like just a gut punch.
It's a bit unfair, yeah. It feels like it's a bit too much.
Yeah, like,
Jamie hasn't done anything as bad as like Ramsay or Joffrey has done. You know, he's a bit like morally but he has always had, the thing about Jamie, he's always had this little sense of honor in the first 2 seasons, like a small amount. Obviously, you know, the incest kind of fucked up. But there's that moment in season 1 where he's fighting Ned, and one of his guys stabs Ned through the leg, and Jamie's pissed off about it because it ruined a duel between 2 men. So there's that layer of it, and then for him to have gone through everything he's gone through and end up with his hand chopped off, one of the greatest fighters in Westeros, being now unable to fight with his dominant hand, has serious implications. It
feels like, as an audience member, he's set up to be like the best swordsman, and we get one little sword fight with Ned. But we're like, okay, he's gonna fight Jon. Like, we're theorizing all these potential things that can happen in the future. Like, he's gonna have this ultra cool showdown with all these characters. He might fight these. He's gonna have like kill 100 men in a battle or something.
Because they set him up that way. They say he's the hero of some battles and he's won all these duels. You know, he was in some kind of tourney at Harrenhal a few years ago with the Targaryen prince.
I love too, like, when Tyrion gets captured and wants trial by combat, his immediate reaction is like, I'm gonna get my brother, right?
Because he's such a good fighter, and everyone knows that. And it's knowledge. We haven't seen it, but it's something they've told us over and over again, and we accept it as truth.
Yeah.
So when he loses his hand,
it's completely fucking shocking.
Fucked up.
Unbelievably shocking. As if that wasn't enough, like, those following episodes, there's like, I think it's like 3-4 episodes after it, this is Game of Thrones running at all fucking cylinders for me. Those interactions with Brienne, like, he is fucking devastated, right? Like,
look, you see that. So that, like, the literal next episode, he is riding along on his horse. He's got his hand dangling,
wrapped around,
literally dangling around his neck, and he falls off his horse from blood loss or whatever it is that makes him feel so faint, into a fucking pool of mud. He gets his open wound and severed hand in a pile of mud, and then he gets the shit beaten out of him.
It's so rough because Jamie is like, at least for the male characters, is probably the last person you could imagine in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he's such a proud, clean, honorable, not overly honorable, but you know, like he's a higher born kind of character.
He's a Lannister.
Exactly.
You know, he's the highest of the high when it comes to like money and shit. Like maybe
the Prince Charming kind of vibe, right?
Yeah.
So to see him literally in the fucking mud with his severed hand hanging off his
long hair, big beard, hand off, ragged clothes. It's such a contrast from where he was earlier in the show.
It's rough.
And it makes you feel for him. It really does, just from seeing all that shit that he's going through there.
Yeah, and that particular scene in season 3 with Brienne.
Yeah.
In the hot tub in the
bath.
The bath. It is probably the best scene of season 3. And
it's
that's
one of the best scenes in the whole series.
Look, it's incredible. In one scene, Jamie goes from being a character that is not overly likable, not overly sympathetic. We don't relate to him. And in an instant, he goes to like nearly everyone's favorite character in the entire show. Throughout the entire show, he's been called Kingslayer, and it's a term that really fucking gets to him, but he tries to like not show it, right? When he tells that story about him killing the king and why he did it and how the king goes crazy and ordered him and the king's guard to burn civilians, and he defies that order, you know, his job is to protect the king, but he defies an order, ends up murdering the king, and how he's had to live with that for his entire life and having that Kingslayer tag, even though he did a morally good thing.
Yeah.
I think that just brings so much weight to his character that was missing before, and it just shows why Game of Thrones is such an incredible show, because we can have these characters and be with them for 2.5 seasons and think they are one thing, and then one scene can just completely flip that on its head. Brienne's reaction to that as well, like it's such a human moment. Some of the best acting in the entire series from both of them. Like
for sure it's brought to life by Jamie's performance.
Yeah.
For sure. He's, after everything he's been through up to this point, he is in that bath, dirty as shit, holding his stump hand covered in a bandage up. And the way he delivers each line, the tears that come out of his eyes, everything about the way he delivers that monologue, explaining why he had to do what he did, it shows such a heavy weight and a form of regret, but also you understand why he made that, and there's no doubt in your mind watching that scene that he did the wrong thing there.
And it wins us as the audience over, and it completely puts Jamie into a different light.
Humanizes him, for sure. It makes him super likable. You're already sympathetic towards him after what he's been through.
Yeah.
But you've heard so much about him being the Kingslayer and what he did, and everyone treating him a bit shittily because of that. And it definitely affected his reputation throughout the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
But being able to hear from him directly what was going through his head at that moment, and hearing from your king, who you've sworn an oath to, that he wants to burn your loved ones and people that you are also sworn to protect.
Yeah.
And then making that decision to stab him in the back. The Mad King fallen to the ground. Ned Stark walks into the hall, sees the blood on your sword, and it's amazing to think about. I wish we got to see some kind of visual, but I will take any day Jamie's explanation.
You don't need the visual because the acting is so fucking incredible. Genuinely, like Nikolai, I forget his last name. It's like Costa. I can't pronounce it.
Some weird Danish.
That's the highlight of his portrayal of Jamie for me, is that scene.
Sure.
He fucking nails it.
For sure.
And just there's other little moments too, like with Brienne, like he lies to protect her from getting raped when they're both captured.
Sapphire Isles.
Yeah. And then obviously when they get separated, but then he finds out that she's been thrown into like this pit against the bear, and the way he jumps down and tries to protect her, like
one-handed into this giant pit.
It's incredible, like against the bear. Yeah, like it completely changes his character. It also does a lot for Brienne's character, because she goes from just being a strong warrior woman to a character with a lot of depth. They have fantastic chemistry between each other. Yeah. And I really like how we get this like almost romantic level of friendship.
That's the thing. I don't think with their relationship, they build together in that kind of way. I don't feel like at any point though it is overly romantic.
It's not, but it's extremely close.
Yeah.
Right.
They have a lot of chemistry. It is like very good to see them together. And she's also the woman who's able to get Jaime Lannister, this Prince Charming, highborn kind of out of her league kind of guy, to open up about something that is one of the most traumatic and relevant moments of his life. And only Brienne can do that from what they share in their relationship. But I don't think it's overly romantic.
It's just, I think it's more of just like a noticeable contrast between Cersei, like how different they are. Also, importantly, like even though the actress that portrays Brienne is certainly
Gwendolyn Christie,
she's not unattractive, right? But in Game of Thrones, she's meant to be fucking hideous from the books. Like the book description is about as bad as you get. Same as Tyrion, right? She's meant to be absolutely hideous, and obviously Jaime is like one of the most attractive people in the entire show. And to get that kind of contrast with these two opposites coming together, it's just a real beautiful moment. And I think season 3 is at its best when these two characters are sharing scenes together.
That's interesting that you said that, because we mentioned, Gwendolyn Christie is not at all unattractive, and they all act like she's some kind of towering troll or giant or something. But she's just tall. She's just a little bit taller than everyone else. Not even overly more muscular. Kind of dresses like a male, which is a bit different in that time, I guess. But yeah, I guess it would have been interesting to see that play out if she was some hideous kind of troll-looking monster, if they played that up a bit more. But still, yeah, I agree. Absolutely beautiful moments with Jaime and Brienne.
Jaime has a thing for blondes. But let's move on to the big thing. Robb Stark, his entire arc comes to an end in season 3, and
prematurely.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. So like obviously we kind of pick up where we left off with season 2, right? The war continues. There's the whole instances like they've captured Jaime, the kind of interesting politics that play out with the Freys. And essentially he swears a promise to Walder Frey, who's extremely important with regards to like the land and the north. I can't quite remember the exact.
They need to cross over the Frey's bridge.
And that's like the only and that's like the only way, right? So to agree to that, he agrees to marry one of Walder Frey's daughters. But then he falls in love and he does the dishonorable thing. So he opts to marry Talisa instead of adhering to his promise to the Freys. And Catelyn's kind of against it as well, but in that time, we don't really see it as being a big issue. Anyway, things kind of progress throughout that season. Like, it's all very tactical about how they're gonna overcome the battle with the Freys. Catelyn and Robb kind of having a tiny bit of conflict as well. And then we come to episode 9, and episode 9 has been established in the show as the big boy episode of each season. There's kind of that expectation, like, okay, what the fuck is going to happen? And we have the Red Wedding, where essentially...
Look, this is the most shocking moment, I believe, in the entire show.
I think it's the highest rated episode in Game of Thrones, if not its top 3. For a character like Robb Stark, who we really, even though he's not quite on the same level as like say Dany or Jon or Tyrion, he's really set up to be like Ned's replacement, right? To have him prematurely betrayed by someone that's not even like a Lannister, or it's gut-wrenching, but the execution of that like episode, it's really, really well done. Look, the Reigns of Castamere might just be like one of the best episodes of Game of Thrones, and I think it's just such a great way to end season 3 as well, even though it's not the final episode. It's again, like I was mentioning last episode, with that kind of structure, how Game of Thrones has the climax in episode 9, and then episode 10 is like trying to fucking scramble and recover from that. And it completely flips the universe, like the Westeros universe. Everything we think is unfolding, it just goes to show nothing is predictable in Game of Thrones. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's such gripping television, is because these spanners just keep getting thrown into the works, and the show changes directions so frequently, and it makes it so gripping because we already know like no character is safe. Things can change at any moment. So they spend like 2 whole seasons of build up with Robb Stark's character, you know, building an army, and then all of a sudden it's over in 60 minutes.
Well, look at what they did there. You've got Ned Stark, who dies tragically in season 1, and they set Robb up to be his replacement, to be the new king in the north. You know, he's taking over from his father. He's doing this for justice for his father, and they really set him up to succeed. He has a lot of insane victories, and we don't get to see a lot of them in the first 2 seasons, but not even in season 3 either. There's a lot of talk, and there's more political intrigue around what Robb is doing, and of course his relationships in this season, but he's still winning, you know, even when he's got his back against the door and the Lannisters are starting to push them harder and harder and harder. You still want him to win. He's still winning. He makes some decisions. I think he has to kill one of his bannermen because he goes a bit off the rails about what Jamie did to his son. You want Rob to succeed. That's something you always feel, but they also set him up to succeed. And you feel like in some ways, Rob and Catelyn, at the very least, are safe because of what they did to Ned. You know, they can't kill Ned and then kill his son and his wife a little bit later.
Just can't happen.
So you never expect it to. And when that moment comes, it is, I think, in my opinion for sure, the most shocking moment in the entire show because it's unexpected and it's tragic and it's so much. You've not just got Rob dying, you've got Catelyn, the widowed Catelyn and mother of all the Stark kids who you've learned to appreciate and care for throughout the show. Rob's new love interest, Talisa, who has been very, very interesting to watch and very charismatic and very likable. And you only find out, I believe, an episode before that she's pregnant with the next generation of Starks. They're going to call the kid Eddard after Ned, after his father.
Yep.
And where does Talisa get stabbed?
Right in the uterus.
Right in her stomach.
In the womb.
It's horrible. I remember watching it live when the episode came out, literally a few hours after it was aired for the first time. My jaw dropped for the entire duration of it, and it's quite a long sequence at the end of the episode as well.
And you also have like that other element too of Arya and the Hound spending literally the entire season trying to get to them, and they literally arrive as
moments too late.
Yeah. Obviously, like the direwolf as well. Rob's direwolf Greywind gets killed. So fucking much happens in that episode. And shout out to Catelyn too, who I quote said about Littlefinger with regards to Ned. He's like a little brother to me, Ned. He would never betray my trust. Right before Littlefinger betrays Ned. And then she says to Rob, I have known Lord Waldar since I was a girl. He would never harm me.
She's got to stop doing that. She's jinxing the shit.
So, Catelyn, I guess, like Ned a little bit. Good character, but dumb.
Yeah.
Wasn't cut out for this world. Doesn't have that. A bit naive in that regard. But, yeah, so I think season 3 is just, honestly, it's probably the most consistent season of Game of Thrones. I think the worst episode of season 3 is probably still in the top, 40 of all time for Game of Thrones.
For sure.
Genuinely, it's so consistent. It might not...
It's a lot of highs.
Yeah, it just constantly hovers around, that 8 out of 10 range. And there's no bad episodes. Even if there's bad scenes or bad moments, they just fly through so quickly because it's such a big ensemble cast that any little problems just get completely overshadowed by the rest. And I mean, some of the fucking episodes here, we're intercutting between some of the best arcs of Game of Thrones' entire run, right? And we're cutting between them in singular episodes. It's fantastic.
Season 3 is the peak of Game of Thrones in popularity and in storytelling.
Absolutely. And then we move on to season 4, which you say season 3 might be your favorite. Look, I think season 4 might be mine.
Okay.
Season 4 is fucking incredible. We kick things off recovering from the Red Wedding still. The whole show's flipped on its head. This whole arc, this whole element of the Starks seeking revenge against the Lannisters and trying to rally the North and stuff kind of just fucking goes away, right?
Yeah.
And it changes. And then all of a sudden Ramsay takes over trying to take over the North and that whole element.
Yeah. So Roose Bolton, who played a massive part in the Red Wedding, is anointed the Warden of the North. And obviously that gives Ramsay a lot of power being his son, and it sets up them as incredible villains as well, just based on how they acted in season 3. But there's a lot of payoff that comes throughout this season for those characters specifically. But you also get the implications of what happened from the Red Wedding with Sansa. I don't believe Arya she does. That's right. Yeah, she's there for it.
Yeah.
So literally. You see Arya's reaction to it. You see Sansa's reaction to it still being in the den in King's Landing.
Yeah.
In the middle of all of this going on. She's
rough.
Beside herself. She's already seen her dad die and
Literally,
recovered from that throughout
no
season
good news
3.
ever for Sansa.
Never. There's barely a good day for the Starks at all in the entire show.
And we see we're introduced to the Stark family as the eyes of the audience, essentially the vehicle for us to see through. And we lose Catelyn, we lose Rob, we lose Talisa, the potential of their unborn child, we lose one of the direwolves. So much from that pilot episode that's set up gets paid off at the end of season 3, and then season 4 we're trying to scramble with it. And one real great arc that continues on is that Arya and the Hound arc, and how They spend all of season 3 to reunite her with her family, and it gets taken away from her, and now it's just like, now what the fuck do we do?
Yeah,
and
they got to come up with a new plan now.
Yeah, and I really like that whole dynamic as well, and just it feels like a slight reset. Like after season 3, it's like, okay, the show's heading in one direction, it changes, let's reset, and it's a small reset, and we kind of continue again throughout season 4. It establishes a lot of new arcs, introduces some new characters, and one of those characters is Oberyn
Martell, and I believe Ilaria Sand.
Yeah.
So the first time we see people from Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oberyn, played by Pedro Pascal, who, look, he's become a huge celebrity since Game of Thrones.
Daddy Pedro.
But at the time, he wasn't quite like the household name that he is now. His character is such a fucking... It just injects life into the show. Like,
yeah,
okay, we've got all these characters, we're unfolding their arcs, that's great. Let's throw in another fucking incredible character with so much depth and like intrigue. In every scene he's in, I'm engaged. Like, he's got a cool accent.
Yeah,
he's a bicon, right? he doesn't mind men or women, and is very open to orgies.
His introduction is incredible as
absolutely,
well.
Yeah. And like the stuff with Littlefinger is great at that brothel. The dynamic too with like Tywin not overly liking him, and how he's kind of there with a bit of a purpose, right? Yeah. To seek revenge. He's such a great character. And
well, they bring him in late, obviously, season 4, not hearing anything about him, but he is very fresh.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his own motives for being in King's Landing, but he's kind of brought into this whole other world that goes on. They wanted the Prince of Dawn to come, and they send Oberyn in his place. Yeah. Oberyn's this world traveler. He's a bit older. He's seen a lot of things. He's got many kids. He's such a likable guy right off the bat, but when you find out his reasoning for coming and being there and what has happened to him in his past, you care for him, you feel bad for him, and you want him to succeed immediately, not just because he's likable, not just because he's a bicon, not just because him and his wife are willing to get down and dirty with whoever it is, but he has a real good reason for being there, and you can fucking back that 100%.
It just freshens up like the King's Landing vibe. Like, Jaime returns and he's a completely, different changed character now.
Yeah.
And then Oberyn gets thrown in, and it keeps things fresh. But I think what's most incredible about season 4 for me is season 3 ends on just such like a gut punch. You could forgive season 4 for doing what season 2 did and having that really slow opening 5-6 episodes like season 2 did after
bit of another setup
the
season.
Climax. Yeah. You would forgive that, but no, season 4 is just like, oh yeah, great job season 3, I'm just gonna keep doing that but better. And episode 2 of season 4, episode 2, by the way,
is it 2?
Is when Joffrey fucking dies. Is
it 2?
It is.
Oh my god, I thought it was like 3 or 4 or something, but that's way earlier.
You imagine like waiting a year for Game of Thrones, being excited, you get that like first episode where it's like, okay, we're setting up everything again, like you've got Jaime returning to King's Landing and we're introduced to some new characters and stuff.
Bit of that reset, like you said. Yeah.
Episode 2, straight back into it. We have that shocking episode with season 3 episode 9, and then we're just going to kill off another major character in Joffrey. Like, why stop there? Why have one like wedding when you can have a second one with Marjorie and Joffrey's wedding? The fact that these episodes, there's only 2 episodes in between these 2 weddings, and they're 2 of the most memorable, prolific episodes of the entire show, just goes to show like season 4 was just fucking on another level, right? Everything from this episode is perfect. You have Joffrey set up like he's kind of, Game of Thrones is like you pay for your consequences. We kind of see that with Theon, we see that with Ned, right? Like he makes mistakes, he pays for it. We see that with Jaime. He seems a bit untouchable, Joffrey.
For 3 seasons, Joffrey has been a little madman tyrant boy,
getting away with fucking everything
because he's the king.
Exactly.
Tyrion's put him in his place a few times, but there's never been real complications for him, and by this point in the story, everyone hates Joffrey.
There's no repercussions for any of his actions until this episode, and it's just an absolute masterclass of setup, execution, payoff.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go. Like, we have him completely humiliating Tyrion in front of everyone, having the dwarf play for his amusement.
Which fucked up. He arranged that just to piss off Tyrion.
Yeah.
And he not only does that, he publicly humiliates him.
After Tyrion's broken up with Shay, by the way.
Oh, true. He's in a horrible moment. He's already lost a lot in season 3, but he's like at a really bad point in his life. I think he's already married to Sansa at this point as well. Is forced into that wedding.
Yeah. Yep. I think so, yeah.
So he's not doing great.
I love how, with the execution of it, they hired who did it from the audience within the episode as well. Like, things are unfolding before our eyes, but we're not given like a little sneak peek of like, you know, someone preparing the poison. Like, we're completely blind to everything that's unfolding, and that's why it's so incredibly shocking. They don't foreshadow it at all. They do if you go back and watch it, but watching it like live for the first time, you'd never pick up on it, right? You have like Sansa there and like the implications it's gonna have for her. You have Littlefinger. You have none of the Tyrells want Marjorie to have to go through with this marriage. It's not ideal, right? They want Joffrey out of the picture.
Yeah, what they do is they set up motive, right, with a lot of different characters.
Yeah.
Specifically from Tyrion, they want you to think it's Tyrion for sure, based on how he reacts and where he is placed. But I think only an episode before, or even in this episode, you have Olenna talking to Sansa or someone asking if it's okay for Joffrey to marry her daughter, to marry Marjorie.
Yep.
And she gets that warning that's like, he's a monster. And she is not going to let that happen. She's not going to let that happen at all. So you set up motive with Olenna as well, but you have weird things happening to Sansa, like with Sir Dontus, the guy who became the jester after season 2, I believe, on Joffrey's name day. Kind of a weird interaction where they bring him back and he gives her a random necklace, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And it's not until this episode again where you see him at the end of the episode escorting Sansa away from this horrible thing in the middle of it happening.
I think the reason why this episode is so fantastic is, for so long throughout Game of Thrones, bad things just seem to be happening to good characters.
Yeah.
This is the first time, maybe besides Jaime to a degree, but this is like the first time where a truly bad thing happens to bad people with the Lannisters. Look, Jack Gleeson, 10 out of 10 performance for this episode. Like, he really fucking goes all out. He leaves no cuntiness uncunted in this performance by him. He is absolutely hateable.
He's doubling down on Joffrey.
Absolutely. He takes Joffrey to another level of Joffrey-ness. That moment where like he drinks the poison is incredibly well executed. You have the implications with Jaime rushing, you know, Kingsguard, but seeing his son die before his very eyes. Like, as a father, you're meant to protect your child, right? Him having to witness that. You have Cersei who runs over and sees like the fucked up face of Joffrey that's gone purple, and he's spitting out like the
and that's horrific to look at too. Like, his
eyes
are red. He's got shit coming out of his nose. He looks veiny. Yeah. He's like all blue and red from choking on whatever is in his mouth. It's fucking disgusting.
Tyrion's reaction holding the wine glass in his hand, everyone turning to look at him, Cersei basically condemning him right then and there that he killed Joffrey. Sansa's reaction, like...
Well, Sansa gets out of there real quick.
Yeah, I think it's a little... No, it's a minor character.
It's Sir Dontus. He comes back. So we know that they've interacted. He's thanked her for saving his life and giving her the necklace, and he just pops into the side and he's like, come with me if you want to live right away.
And the audience is like, what the fuck is happening right now? Yeah. It's so incredibly executed. And to have like that level of episode, like the king dying, right, happening in episode 2, it just goes to show like, this is where Game of Thrones is firing on all fucking cylinders, and it's not waiting to the end of the season to have these big episodes. It's fucking throwing them in right from the get-go. It's a cathartic episode for a lot of fans because we finally see a terrible character die.
It's shocking, but it feels good.
But it's also bittersweet in a sense that like, what the fuck is gonna like be the repercussions from this? And that's kind of what season 4 focuses on. We'll touch on that later because fucking season 4 just has so much to touch on. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. I think we'll talk about Littlefinger and Sansa because, like we said, like Sansa gets whisked away and then thrown on a boat, and then we find out that Littlefinger actually had something to do with Joffrey's murder, which is completely unexpected. Like, we know Littlefinger is a conniving, you know, guy that does what he wants. Even I didn't expect him to be responsible for killing Joffrey.
So he's been gone for a bit as well. We haven't seen a lot of Littlefinger.
Yeah.
He was given Harrenhal, and he was given some land over in the Reach as well. So he's been away for a bit, but he is always plotting as a character. And you get some payoff from that where he is on a ship in a misty night and Sir Dontos delivers Sansa to him. Then he kind of expectedly kills Dontos just because that's Littlefinger, you know. Yep. He reveals in that moment that he had something to do with it. It's not the full picture. You get the kind of implication that it's not everything. He's not being truthful with everything, but it's definitely implied and heavily hinted at that he had something to do with it.
Yeah, and it's a great moment because finally Sansa is free of King's Landing.
4 seasons of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of build up. Can she get the fuck out of there? Because she just needs to, right? And it finally happens. And Littlefinger, who's like a character who betrayed her father, right? A character like the audience knows not to trust. All of a sudden, Sansa is now in his hands. They go to the Eyrie, where Sansa's aunt is. What's her name?
I believe it's Lysa Arryn.
Yeah.
And then her cousin Robin.
Yeah, Lysa and Robin's Arryn. It's such a nice little breakaway for Sansa's character because I feel like they kind of milked everything they could with her being in King's Landing.
Yeah,
like she went through it all. Now it's like a fresh start with her, with Littlefinger. Again, like Jaime and Brienne, it's another unexpected kind of character collaboration.
Yeah.
And I really, really love the scenes they share together because it's the first time Sansa really starts to fucking grow as a character through his tutelage with teaching her like some of his ways, right? And then like later on in the season, we have that moment where he kills Lysa, right? Like we kind of meander for a few episodes and it's not overly interesting, but like he's kind of playing the game, like he's kind of romantically interested in her, but does he even like her? We don't really know. It seems like they have a good relationship. It's kind of funny.
He's trying to get her to marry.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And then he pushes her out the well, which is foreshadowed nicely in season 1 with like the Tyrion stuff.
Oh, the moon door. Yeah.
The moon door watching her fly.
Look, that's an awesome moment for him.
It's a cathartic fucking moment for him, right? Because Littlefinger's the guy that doesn't get his hands dirty, but here he's literally pushing her out the moon door and killing her. And I really, really appreciate the care that they put into Sansa's character, because Sansa in season 1, season 2, season 3 would be like, go tell the nearest guard, oh my god, Littlefinger just did this. But she recognizes that, okay, yeah, Littlefinger just killed her crazy aunt.
Yeah.
But what would happen to her? She's under the care of like Littlefinger. She recognizes that she needs to be smart, and this is where she starts to learn the game, and she's learning what Littlefinger has taught her throughout the season.
Well, look at where she comes from, right? So she spends the first 3 seasons walking on eggshells under abuse in King's Landing. She comes out of that immediately to be transported with Littlefinger to the Eyrie, where she believes she's safe with family with her aunt, but her aunt ends up being kind of batshit fucking crazy as it is.
Yep.
She like slaps her, she yells at her, she loses her shit. It's an uncomfortable spot for her to be in as well.
Absolutely.
And Littlefinger has slowly been getting Sansa to trust him and teaching her a few things about how he does things. And it is interesting for her to have something new and fresh to do, but it also lays the foundations for Littlefinger manipulating her in a few different ways and getting her to completely trust him. If her aunt threatens her, Littlefinger's going to deal with that problem for her.
Yeah.
And it puts some level of reliance and codependence on Littlefinger, which has a bit of payoff later on as well.
And it plants the seeds for Sansa's character arc as well. Like, this is like a fresh start for her, and it plants the seeds for what we later get in the end of the Game of Thrones series, where she becomes a bit more of a poorly executed but smart character who's playing the game. Let's talk about Dany. So season 3, I think, is like where she finds her feet again. Season 4 is a big return to form for Dany's arc, in my opinion. We get a huge internal kind of conflict where like things are kind of going well. She's capturing the city, she's coming across these problems, but she's dealing with them. It's a real like girl power moment.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden a spanner gets thrown in the works with her dragons start killing children.
A bit of a spanner.
Yes, a slight moral issue for her. And I really like how, like, okay, the dragons are fucking badass. They're the key to her power, right? Without her dragons, she's potentially nothing, right? Even though she's definitely still growing as a character.
So are the dragons, by the way. They up in size every season dramatically.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of towards the beginning of season 4 where that farmer comes in with the ashes and the bones of his child from the dragons.
Well, they hint at it. They do it really well. So you get those moments earlier on in season 4 where she's hanging out with the dragons, and I think Drogon starts being a little bit like scary and violent towards her, and it's like, oh, she's starting to lose her control. Then you get people coming to her. So Dany's at the height of her power right now. You know, she's literally anointed herself the Queen of Meereen. She's got a pyramid, a whole town, city. People worship her. And you get these people coming to her with problems. Someone comes in, they're like, oh, my goat has been burned by a giant flying beast. And she's like, I'm sorry, here, you can have this. So it's slowly building up to it. Eventually, when you get that farmer who comes in and is like, your dragons burned my child alive. And she's like, oh,
fuck.
Whoops. Whoopsie-days.
It's like those parents that have like a pit bull and it goes and kills a kid.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's similar to that, I guess. But you've got that moment for her where, what do you do if that does happen? You know, you have to consider putting down the dog.
Yeah.
When it comes to the dragon, she considers them her children.
She needs them.
She also knows, how powerful they can be, and she needs them for her eventual goal. So what can you do? What is the situation? How do you handle this?
It's the perfect element of conflict that her character really needed, I think. She's got like the conflict with, obviously, the dynamic with the slavery, right? Like, yes, killing all the slavers and freeing the slaves is a morally good thing to do, but it's creating problems. And it's kind of like, okay, you put out one fire, but two more appear.
Yeah.
And now you have this element with her dragons, which are extremely important. Like you said, they're her children. They're essential to her rule, but now that she can't control them and they're going loose. So she ultimately has to make that really hard decision for her and lock them up. That was just something I didn't really expect. Like the show kind of is like, okay, she's a character who has dragons, cool. But here's some of the complications that come with that. I think it's the first time we kind of get that with the dragons in season 4, and I really appreciate that.
And the show really kind of banks on, fuck yeah, we have dragons. And for them to make the decision to go, okay, we lock the dragons up now in a deep, dark hole, chained up.
It's a cool moment, I think, for her character. And her arc in general, like in season 4, season 3 is, again, a bit more of like a setup season. And we have that like climactic ending where she's really starting to get like the love of the people and she's praised as being this like leader and queen. But season 4 is where she starts to learn like being a leader isn't all that easy.
Shit starts to unravel for her.
Exactly. She has the problem with the whole like slaver dynamic, and she's kind of put in like a situation where she can never win, right? Because like morally she has that where she wants to free the slaves because she was once kind of a slave herself, right? So we totally get that from her point of view, but she's fucking with the culture of all these different cities.
And it's this ancient culture that has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And you get that questioned in this season as well, where it's like, is what she's doing really right? Because some of these slaves come to her and they're like, look, you need to allow this to happen. It's been a culture for hundreds of years. You need to respect my people. You got other people going, look, can I please go back to being a slave? It's all I've known for my entire life. I can't deal with being free. My life is worse being free. I was well treated as a slave. And obviously you can't get it right for everyone. But that's an interesting moral dilemma that's thrown to her and gives her something to develop on and make those tough choices in certain situations.
It ticks all the boxes it needed for her character arc, right? It gives her character development. She probably gets the most character development in this season than any other season besides season 1, right? We get like the dynamic with the dragons, the dynamic with like the slave morality and how that impacts her as a ruler. And it works as both an engaging and entertaining political drama with her character, as well as foreshadowing what it would be like if she was to rule Westeros, right? Because at this point, she probably still is the favorite for like the throne, right?
Yeah.
I think season 3 is a real big push in that direction where she goes from,
well, now that Rob's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Like Rob's gone, okay, maybe Dany is the next one to take over, and season 4 kind of continues that. And I really like the political intrigue and stuff that we get with her in season 4. I think it's a really well executed season and probably the peak of Dany's arc before she kind of begins a downward trajectory in future seasons, I think.
I just want to touch on as well, there are a few moments throughout season 3 and 4 that kind of allude to her being a little bit loosey-goosey in the brain, you know?
Yeah.
So there's
foreshadowing.
There's a moment where I think they come into Marine, I believe is the city, and they have hundreds of slaves on crosses strung up, dead, lining the road to the city.
Yeah.
And then what she decides to do after taking that city is stringing up all the masters and doing the exact same thing to them. Obviously, it's quite brutal. Obviously, it's like a step too far. But instead of abolishing it completely, she kind of like doubles down and she's like, I'm doing that to you now. It shows a little bit of darkness in her character, and that obviously has a bit of payoff later on. But it shows a few bits like that. There's also a moment where she has to execute, I believe, a slave who does something that he believes is right that she disagrees with, and she has the massive display in front of the entire city to execute that one slave.
Yeah, and also too, like her relationship with Dario, and then the conflict that kind of creates with Jorah I believe too, that's when she finds out that Jorah was a spy,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah.
big payoff for season 1. Like, there's just so many interesting elements going on with Dany, and even though like season 4 just has a fuck ton going on, she's not really prevalent as a focus compared to say season 1, where she was like, okay, she's one of the big dogs. She's more like a piece of the puzzle rather than being one of the central characters. But everything we get here is quality. I'm a huge fan of her arc in season 4.
While I like the complications that are involved in that, I do have to say I think season 3, showing her rise to power and the direct contrast to how she was in season 2, I probably prefer a little bit more. But I do like the moral conflicts and dilemmas that she has to deal with in this season, although it's a little bit less interesting than her conquering.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's a fair point. Let's talk about Jon and the Night's Watch, because I think too, like with Dany, I think this is where Jon's arc is most interesting as well. Jon is one of those characters, like his arc is just super solid and consistent. There's never any like bad moments with him, at least in the first like 5-6 seasons, right? Season 4 for me is probably the peak of it as well, because we've just undergone like a shit ton of setup in season 3. Yeah. We get the relationship that's blossomed with Ygritte, him having his morals tested again, like with the wildlings, and how he's kind of left the Night's Watch, kind of, and then he gets put on trial as well. And there's just so many interesting elements going on with that. And season 4 is where it really kind of comes to a head.
So we've seen Jon kind of take a bit of a detour for the last 2 seasons. He's been with the wildlings. He's not really been focusing on his duties as a brother because he hasn't been in that position. But in season 4, we get to see him come back to that.
Yeah.
And how things have changed at Castle Black and how he kind of fits into that story now, knowing what he knows about the wildling and having the experience that he has. He's a different man when he comes back.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like a throwback to like seasons 1 and 2 with the Night's Watch. Like Sam returns from Craster's Keep.
Bit of a reunion.
Jon has left Ygritte with that heartbreaking kind of moment where they separate. Things kind of kick off again. And his arc, like the whole dynamic between him having to stand trial for, essentially leaving Castle Black is super interesting.
And killing Corran Halfhand as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a similar way to how season 2 set up the massive battle in episode 9 with the Blackwater Bay battle.
Yeah.
The Battle of the Blackwater, we get in season 4 a very similar kind of setup where you have seen from Jon's point of view that the wildlings are coming. They know they can get over the wall. You've got kind of a pincer movement going on between Tormund's group and a few of the groups that are already south of the wall. And then you've got Mance and his entire army and all the clans coming to attack the wall.
The giants.
The giants as well.
Establishes them.
Mammoths and shit. You know, you've got a lot of stuff like preparing for that. And it's a threat that is looming over the entirety of season 4. And you have Jon for the whole season trying to make his point known that they are coming and they need to prepare for that. And now that you've lost the previous Lord Commander, Jeor Mormont, you've kind of got the Night's Watch run by idiots. You've got Janos Slynt, who used to be the head of the Gold Cloaks, or the head of the City Watch in King's Landing, who was, thrown out by Tyrion for being kind of a sleazy dude, who's now in a high-ranking position. And then you've got who is currently in charge of the Night's Watch, Sir Alistair Thorne, who has always been, pardon the pun, but a thorn in Jon's side since he's been at the Night's Watch, who's someone who's been beating him down, is now effectively in charge of the Night's Watch. So you've got Jon trying to pitch these ideas and tell them the truth of what's happening. Yeah. And they're just like, no.
And them not trusting him
at all.
At all, and really being against the idea that Jon's proposing of trying to, have peace between letting the wildlings come south of the wall.
Well, yeah. So Jon has a very, he has seen who they are and who they are as people and what he can offer them. He's the only one who has. everyone else is still in the opinion that the wildlings are a terrible, evil enemy that are coming to kill everyone there. And they don't know the reasons for why the wildlings are coming south 100%. They still don't believe. Janos specifically doesn't believe in the White Walkers or anything that's going on there. Yeah. So they just see them as a force that needs to be defeated. And you have some super, super overwhelming odds. Barely any of the castles on the wall are manned. The Night's Watch has the lowest numbers it has had for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And you have the biggest wildling force ever.
They're untrained as well. Yeah. Like Jon's trying to whip them into shape. Always has. This isn't a force that you feel confident in defending the wall.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so season 4 basically plays out it's a big setup with that whole dynamic, and it ultimately culminates in one of the, again, best episodes of Game of Thrones in episode 9, The Watchers on the Wall. Continuing that fashion, that trend of the episode 9 being the big climactic episode. I mean, season 4 has like 5 of them, but this episode in particular, it's the big battle sequence, and it is fucking incredible.
It's awesome.
Incredibly well shot, like just the visuals, right? Like having these big giants and the mammoths and them climbing the wall and then the pincer attack from the other side. The wall itself just being such a engaging, you know, like geographical setting to have a battle like this.
You always think that it's just like this big block of ice, and then you've got moments where the wildlings are climbing the wall and these massive fucking chain things come out of the wall and swipe them away like they're ants. Incredible shit. The way they defend is so awesome. They are up against the odds the entire episode, and I think this episode, the entire focus was on this battle. Like just like the Blackwater battle was, you know, it's
one of the few times at this point in time, especially like Blackwater is. I'm not too sure if every scene was focused around the Blackwater battle.
I believe it was.
I think so, but yeah, this was definitely one of those episodes. Like very few of them, even ones that you think are like, for example, the Red Wedding or the Purple Wedding, for example, they still had cutaway ensemble scenes that were like squeezed in there. But this is an episode that just gives its full attention to this battle, and it is fucking incredible.
You've got some significant shit that goes on in this episode as well. You've got, you know, there are threats on the Wildling side, whether you like the characters Ygritte, Tormund, or not, or you hate them, like some of the Thens, the creepy, like all makeup kind of like guys that eat people. You know, you've got Mance coming, you've got other people.
The personal stakes for Jon with Ygritte
Of course. And you've got like Sam being thrown into the middle of the battle. You've got Pip and a few other of the characters that have been with Jon since the start. There's a lot of like moments for things to go wrong in this episode, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but the ultimate thing that you're feeling that's different from the Battle of Blackwater Bay is they're just horribly unprepared. And
this is a episode too, like speaking about seasons 1 and 2, we wouldn't have got this kind of episode in those seasons because of the budget restraints.
True.
But now they're given the budget and they really fucking shine. Like the fighting choreography, the way the battle like unfolds, it feels very like Lord of the Rings level in terms of production value. It's incredible. And then like you have the personal stakes, the stakes for Westeros, like what happens if the wildlings take over,
breach the wall. You know, the wall is no longer there to defend against any of the threats to the north.
Normal television show, we're not worried about Jon at all. Game of Thrones, we're fucking terrified. Like, are we about to lose Jon? You know, because we've lost Robb the previous season. No one's safe in this universe. Like, so the stakes are genuinely there. The last time he saw Ygritte was when she put like 3 arrows in him, right?
When they broke up.
And that was a super like heartbreaking scene. And then to see her come to the Night's Watch and they have that like little showdown where they see each other across the battle before she gets killed by what's the name of the kid?
Ollie, I believe is his name.
Ollie getting like Ollie as a character too, like getting revenge from his parents being murdered by the wildlings.
So the wildlings invade Ollie's village. He literally sees the Thens kill his family in front of him. And then he goes to the Night's Watch. He's a little bit of a squire. He's there. All he's doing during this battle is raising up the elevator down and up. When the wildlings breach the wall, and they're in and they're fighting and there's so much shit. There's people dying left, right, and center. Alistair gets severely injured. Janos Slint is hiding in a fucking little kitchen somewhere. You know, you've got Tormund fucking people up. You've got the Thens fucking people up. You've got Sam fighting. And there's this, it's chaos. It's pure chaos. There's still people on the top of the wall fighting the giants and everyone trying to climb. And there's that really, really nice moment where you get Jon looking at Ygritte and they have a moment of, is she going to shoot him? They've said they're going to kill each other. Do they still have feelings for each other? How's this going to go? And Jon kind of like lets it all go. He looks at her and he's like, if this is what's going to happen, it's going to happen. I won't kill you.
He couldn't do it.
No matter what, the feelings that he's felt, he's a wildling sympathizer, but he loves Ygritte. It's the first woman he's loved. You know, he's not going to do it, and he's willing to make that choice here, no matter what happens to him or the Night's Watch. So in true Game of Thrones fashion, Ollie comes out of nowhere with a bow and shoots her right in the heart. And it's sad. It's super upsetting.
And we watch her like pass away in his arms.
Jon rushes to her no matter what's going on in the middle of this fight, right up to her and holds her as she dies. And she says some final words to him as well. A classic catchphrase.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
You know nothing, Jon Snow, and the tears fall out of everyone's eyes.
It's super rough because it's like it's kind of like a forbidden romance, right? Like, we still love Ygritte even though she's on like the other side, right? This episode has crazy implications for Jon's character moving forward.
He changes.
The Night's Watch moving forward. The wildling dynamic moving forward. It has a huge bearing on the show. What I really appreciate about this episode is, I think in these types of shows, right, when you have these battle-focused like episodes or moments, they tend to just focus more on like the visual spectacle or like the action and the coolness of the action. But behind that is actually some real emotional weight with Jon and Ygritte's relationship. And I really appreciate that we have, they don't sacrifice the story for the spectacle like they do in a few future episodes, I think.
Yeah.
And
agreed. I think I know what you're talking about with future episodes, and I agree with what you mean. This one, while having amazing like visuals and some incredible fight choreography, it doesn't just focus on the action element of it. It's lot of there's stakes to everything that's going on. You feel every character's journey during this battle.
Yep.
And it obviously has some amazing emotional moments as well throughout it.
And we have some, character deaths. Like Ygritte, huge part of the show, huge part of Jon's character, obviously dying, and then a few of the minor characters with the King's Watch, like I think Eddie.
The Night's Watch for sure, You got Pip, I think, gets shot. Yeah, is it Eddie, the guy who goes into the tunnel to defend against the giant?
I think that's him, yeah. Like, a pretty powerful send-off for him. And
although we don't get to see it, we feel that you get to see the moments right up to it.
Yeah.
The giant charging down the tunnel, and obviously he does succeed, but we don't find out his fate until the dust is settled after the battle, and I think that was a really interesting way to show that as well. It's just one more fuck you kind of to Jon in that moment.
It's an incredibly powerful climax to really what is like the whole Night's Watch story arc.
Yeah, true.
Then it begins a whole new arc in season 5. Incredible season throughout, and that episode is just an absolute perfect climax.
I think at the end of that, the losses that the Night's Watch suffer show that it's pretty much over for them. They've won this fight, but if they were to try and defend at any other point, they will lose just based on what they've lost, which forces Jon, who is kind of de facto leader at this point, to make a decision in the final episode. In the final episode, based on the implications of that battle, he has to make a very kind of mature decision for his character from the losses of Ygritte, and he rides north to go and talk to Mance, someone he respects and knows, and he is willing to end this whole thing there if he has to, no matter what it takes, whether that's killing him or not, 1v1 combat, something like that. Obviously, it doesn't come to fruition with Stannis interrupting that, but still amazing moments, a kind of a back and forth between the Night's Watch and the Wildling, and some of the most interesting stuff that we have seen from the Wall and that part of the world in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's head back to King's Landing. Season 4 has so much going on, but for me, the highlight of the season is absolutely Tyrion's arc. So season 2 is a big season for Tyrion, right? We get a lot of that kind of setup with his character, him navigating King's Landing, the different relationships that he has with his family, and then obviously Blackwater and the fallout from that. Season 3, he takes a slight backward step. Other characters show a bit more prominence. Season 4, he's thrown right back into like being that main character of Game of Thrones yet again, after Joffrey's death.
Yeah.
So obviously he's been framed immediately to be the person responsible.
Cersei literally points the finger at him.
Season 4 is pretty much all of the King's Landing stuff is centered around that whole dynamic, like them trying to recover from the death of Joffrey and Tyrion as well, like being imprisoned, and like what is the fate of Tyrion. Like I mentioned earlier, like no one is safe in Game of Thrones, so Tyrion being put in this predicament is concerning because Tyrion is definitely a fan favorite at this point and one of the most likable characters on the show. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about one problematic thing I have with season 4, and that is a particular scene right after Joffrey's death involving his parents. So Joffrey's lying there deceased with the like pebbles on his head,
the eye stone things,
and
in the Grand Sept as well.
Yep. Jaime and Cersei have a scene together, and obviously like these two characters have a lot of history. It's like their kid, even though Jaime isn't publicly like the father. Look, what follows is, in my opinion, probably the biggest and maybe only big misstep that season 4 has, and it's an extremely controversial scene. Like, I remember it was controversial at the time, but I definitely don't think it's aged very well either. Is where Jaime essentially rapes Cersei over Joffrey's dead corpse.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Look, it's just confusing. We get Jaime, who has essentially been redeemed throughout his actions, saving Brienne.
Entire season of character development.
An entire season of amazing character development. And we feel like Jaime's in a different place when he comes back to King's Landing. He's obviously got his new golden hand. He's trying to recover. He's trying to learn fighting with his left, Brienne is still there with him. After he loses Joffrey, I don't know if it's like he's just super upset or... No, I can't even explain it. I don't even know how to explain why he makes that decision in that moment.
It doesn't make any sense, and I believe it's something from the books. I might be wrong, but like either way, George R. R. Martin is a showrunner in season 4, so he's involved.
He included
with
it for a reason, yeah.
It's extremely confusing to me
and uncomfortable.
Honestly, one of the worst moments in Game of Thrones up until this point. Like Game of Thrones is a pretty consistent show, even when they have like some bad moments or bad execution. This is just completely like distasteful.
Yeah,
it doesn't work at all. It undoes a lot of the character development that went towards Jaime. It's a decision that doesn't make sense with his character,
especially where he is now in the story. Like, why would he come back and have this become his obsession again and do it at that point in time and that location, literally right next to your dead child?
Yeah,
it's gross. It's a bit fucked up. Like, obviously an incestuous relationship in a television show is quite problematic on its own, but like to have him rape his sister under the body of their dead it's fucked up.
It's something that should have happened if you were going to do something like that before his arc.
Yeah, the fact in like season 2. And I know he wasn't available to do that. Yeah. Like, obviously there's the moments with Joffrey and everything, like they couldn't do it at that point, but cut it. Cut it at that point. Like, you've redeemed him.
I can't believe the showrunners like sat back, watched that scene.
Like, that's good.
And they're like, yeah, let's air this.
Yeah.
Like, it's terrible decision. I don't know. It doesn't work. No matter what way you look at it, it doesn't work. It's kind of insulting to Joffrey a little bit. Like, the fact that it's kind of like that their parents are fucking having sex right over his body.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird for like their relationship, because you would think like, even though Cersei it's kind of rape, but like I guess she kind of submits to it in the end, even though it definitely starts off a bit rapey, and I don't know, but
she's
not like screaming to stop.
She's asking for it not to happen, and it's understandable considering the emotion she's feeling and the location that they are, and like she might be in a totally different place, but I do not believe that she thinks it's okay at any point throughout.
But she doesn't stop it either.
I just don't get why they'd make Jaime this kind of like, we've got the backstory, we've seen what he's become and what he's gone through in season 3, and for some reason they make the decision to make him unlikable again.
And what's worse, though, is he does this, but then the show forgets about it.
Yeah, like it has no relevant impact on his arc or his story.
It's never brought up again.
Throughout the rest of season 4. Like
Cersei never mentions it.
Yeah.
Jaime never brings it up or apologizes
Nothing comes
for it.
of that. I don't believe anything comes of that. No, yeah, because there's other moments later on throughout the show that could lead to something that happens, but it's super weird, it's super bizarre, doesn't have an impact, and it's just kind of fucked up and a little bit gross.
Yep, worst moment of the first 4 seasons for me.
And one of Jaime's worst moments overall.
Yeah. Let's go back to Tyrion, because Peter Dinklage, I don't know if he won an Emmy for this, but my god, does he give the performance of his fucking life in this season in particular. Like, he's fantastic in all seasons of the first 4, right?
Yeah.
Like, all 4 seasons, he's incredible, but season 4, like, he's brilliant in season 2, but I don't know, season 4, there's just something, he's built different in this season. It feels like there's a stronger personal element that's really eking through his performance. And when he's on trial, like, it's so incredibly engaging and it's drawn out. You have like the scene with like Oberyn.
Well, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people, when they think about Peter Dinklage's performance as Tyrion in season 4, is that trial moment where he gives that massive speech, and obviously that's fucking amazing. But there are a lot of really good Tyrion moments throughout the season, because we get kind of a different moment for his character. Like, we get bits in the cell where he's able to talk and have development with Jaime. We get moments with Oberyn. We get moments with Pod before he goes off to be with Brienne. We get moments with Bronn where they end their friendship.
Incredible scene.
Yeah.
Because They stay true to Bronn's character. Bronn is a character who's always been motivated just by money.
He's selfish, you know, like he's
absolutely
friends with Tyrion, he likes Tyrion, but at the end of the day, he's going to do what's right for him.
Exactly. And it just works across the board, right? Bronn basically saying, like, I'm not going to risk my life for you, it's not worth it to me. Well, it was a very fitting, obviously.
You know, I can respect that.
Yeah.
So Tyrion is obviously in the trial. It essentially culminates in Tyrion demanding a trial by combat, which is shocking for the show. Cersei anoints the Mountain as her champion, and then it's up to Tyrion to find someone to fight for him. Otherwise, he will have to fight the Mountain himself, and I'd love to see that, but obviously it wouldn't go super well.
And it's an incredible moment of the show for like quite a few different reasons. So first of all, the whole adage of trial by combat has been established with Tyrion. In season 1.
True.
His first instinct in that moment is Jaime. Jaime's out of the picture now because season 3 he's lost his hand and can't fight anymore, right?
So even though he's there for Tyrion, he cannot do it and he does not stand a chance.
Absolutely. And it's again like showing repercussions, like, okay, if Jaime had his hand in this moment, he would fight, but then the whole conflict that creates, because he's essentially fighting the suspected murderer of his son, but he's not his public son. And his sister.
He'd be going against his sister.
It's complicated,
confusing,
right? But it's pre-established, the whole trial by combat. The Mountain has been pre-established all this time. Like he's been talked about. He's been shown a bit of a showdown with the Hound, but we haven't really quite seen him get a big moment against a big character.
Obviously, he's recast as well for this season. We get to see him as a bit of a different dude, so is seeing him in a new light as well. He's a very formidable force for sure, and it's been set up that way.
And then I love too how they call back to all of the times Tyrion, you know, slapped Joffrey, and their general like hatred for each other that they shared as well, and how that kind of comes back to bite him. It just feels like we've had 4 seasons of setup leading to this, and it just works across the board. Like, it's seriously incredible. And Oberyn, who's just kind of thrown in as like a cool charismatic side character, all of a sudden has huge revelation, huge prevalence with this plot, because he will be Tyrion's champion, and he will fight in the trial by combat.
So there's the amazing scene in the cells with Tyrion and Oberyn, and he comes in and he explains in a very emotional performance his history with the Mountain and his sister and his sister's kids, and how the Mountain, when the Targaryens fell, his sister was married to one of the Targaryens.
And
obviously that means that his nephews and nieces were also Targaryens. So the Mountain, under orders from Tywin Lannister and the Lannister army, raped and murdered his sister and murdered the kids. And it's fucked up. You feel really bad for Oberyn, but there's a moment where he delivers that kind of like, he talks about his life a little bit, he gives a performance, he talks about what happened to him, and then it's a really kind of, it gives me goosebumps just even thinking about it or when I watch it, but he is like, I will be your champion. And it's like, bro, go for it. You fucking go hard. You've got reason to be in this fight. This is what you've been waiting for. It's like, as soon as Cersei names the Mountain, Oberyn's like, I'm fucking fighting him no matter what, no matter who I'm for. He already has a bit of a relationship with Tyrion, and that's established throughout season 4. Like, when he decides to do that, it's such a powerful moment. You really want to see that fight, you know? Like, you're super pumped for it as soon as that happens.
I especially love too, like you said, it's not a plot contrivance. It's not like the showrunners have just gone, it would be cool to see Oberyn fight the Mountain for fan service. No, his whole fucking character is built around this revenge, right? And I really love too, like, how he's such like a laissez-faire kind of character, a very easygoing, laid-back, charismatic kind of dude. But then we have that moment with Tyrion, and we get to see like a completely different side of him, and hearing that backstory. And I love too in that whole episode, like, we're brainstorming as an audience, like, what the fuck is Tyrion gonna do? Like, how's he gonna get out of this? Like, okay, is someone gonna come and rescue him?
How's he gonna get out of this?
Yeah, like,
is he gonna have to fight
Jaime
the
can't fight for him, or Bronn will step in. He did it before. No, Bronn won't do it. Okay, well, like, what the fuck is gonna happen, right? And it just kind of comes out of nowhere, but it makes perfect sense. And it gives us that perfect kind of setup for that trial by combat. Like we've mentioned about 10 times in the last 2 podcasts, Game of Thrones is known for its shocking moments, and that trial by combat might just be, again, one of the most shocking moments. Like, I still...
It's fucking awesome.
My jaw's never fucking recovered. I've had to
From seasons 3 and 4 of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I've had to walk it with it, like, dragging along the floor ever since. It's really ruined my life.
Look, talking just a little bit more on Tyrion's moments in that cell and the bits that he gets as a character in this season, there's another one that really comes to mind where he has a conversation with Jaime.
Yep.
There's the bugs crawling around the cell, and he's talking about his cousin who is a little bit simple-minded. The clunk clunk monologue, do you remember that?
I do.
It's so kind of a bit weird, but it's incredibly memorable, everything he was talking about and his motivations for like understanding what his cousin was doing. Obviously that conversation culminates in Tyrion asking Jaime for help and Jaime having to reject him in that specific scene. But it's just, there's beautiful character moments with Tyrion throughout this whole season, obviously culminating in the trial, the massive trial that leads up to it. So we talked a bit about Oberyn and his motivations for wanting to do the trial by combat, but during the trial he was actually asked by Tywin Lannister to sit on the Council of Judges.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because he's a bit of a unbiased kind of point in that. You've got Tywin who assembles the judges. It's himself obviously being Hand of the King, and I believe obviously since Joffrey has died he's also kind of acting king at that point.
And a whole dynamic too with like how even though he's Tyrion's father, there is bias, but it's not the way you would think.
Yeah, no, they set up throughout the whole show until this point. Tywin has his kind of opinions about Tyrion, and Tyrion has established his relationship with his father a bit. In this moment, we get to see who they really are and how they really react to each other. He elects Oberyn to be a member of the council, being kind of an unbiased point, but they also put Mace Tyrell on the Council of Judges, who was 100% bought and paid for by Tywin and the Lannisters.
Yep.
So it's kind of from the get-go, Tyrion is set up to lose this trial. Whether or not, you know, what goes on during this trial, he's probably going to be guilty. And it's an interesting moment for Game of Thrones that shows us more of that political and almost a courtroom drama. Like, it literally kind of is a courtroom drama.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the moment, like how it's run is a bit different from modern day times, but it's essentially that same kind of format.
Feels like the climax of the first 4 seasons for Tyrion, because we get all these moments where they bring in characters that he's interacted with.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about him, and you have like Littlefinger come in and Varys comes in, and like it's kind of like a back and forth. Like every time something bad happens, something good happens. But the thing that really like twists the knife for Tyrion is when they bring in Shay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most heartbreaking moments of the entire series for me, because Shay is a character that Tyrion falls for. He can't be with her for a number of reasons, but then is like forced to marry Sansa, and
he sends Shay away. Like he believes that she is gone and completely out of the city,
and she comes back out of fucking nowhere,
which is shocking on its own.
And we kind of suspect like, oh, she'll defend him, she'll speak for his goodwill. And then she lies in front of the entire court and basically is like the final straw that A, tips Tyrion off the edge, but B, like basically establishes that, yeah, like he's guilty. After that, like his heart is just fucking crushed. Like he's already got the complicated relationship with his family and how much Tywin, his father, hates him. And obviously his whole character, like backstory as well, like just everything he's gone through. And in that moment, he's just like, fuck it. And he gives one of the best monologues, the best speeches of the entire series, where he flips the script and he says, fuck it, I'm going all out. I wish I fucking murdered Joffrey.
I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish I had.
Oh.
You know, to see the look on all your face, he loses his shit. He stops playing the game. He becomes very raw, and it obviously doesn't help him, but he knows at this point, with how the whole trial goes, that he's fucked anyway.
Yeah.
You know, from the get-go, the judges are stacked, the witnesses are stacked, everything they're saying is swaying the jury opinion, you know, like, he's going to lose this. Shay coming in after everything that they've been through, saying horrible, horrible things about him and lying about him, fucking sends him off. In a similar way to Jaime being at his lowest in season 3, Tyrion is at his lowest in season 4.
And it's a beautiful contrast to throwback to season 1 with Ned Stark. You have Ned, who in that moment, like, he chooses to admit to something that he is not guilty of, right, for the sake of his family, and it backfires. Tyrion, on the other hand, he has this moment. He doesn't plead his innocence the whole way. He just says, fuck it. He goes off, and that speech that he gives is so fucking cathartic. And how he, like, basically establishes his disdain towards King's Landing and everything. And it's just an incredible moment. And
it's just honest, you know?
Peter Dinklage's performance here, I think this episode is the single best performance by any actor in Game of Thrones. I don't think too many people would argue with that. Like, it's so incredibly raw, and when he gives that line where it's like, I've been on trial for being a dwarf my entire life, like, that
powerful shit,
that comes through. Like, that's not acting, that's just raw from Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, that comes from him. Like, he feels that when he's saying that. Obviously it's Tyrion in that moment, but yeah. it's a beautiful performance from
no
Peter
other actor
Dinklage.
on the planet could have delivered that.
And if he didn't win an Emmy for it, he should have.
Look, fucking Emmys are dumb anyway, but yeah, it was incredible. And it's just, I don't know, this episodic run, like episode 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of season 4 is the best run of Game of Thrones, in my opinion.
It's a good streak. It's a good streak of a couple episodes.
It's incredible, and it's carried by Tyrion's arc for sure.
Yeah.
And then we get the episode 8, The Mountain and the Viper.
Oh, yeah.
And really, all that you need to know about this episode is the Mountain and the Viper. They go head to head. Everything else, like a lot of important shit happens in the episode, but let's face it, this is what we're after. The trial by combat.
Yeah.
And
so it's been set up throughout the whole season. Oberyn's agreed to be Tyrion's champion, and now we finally get to see it. So, you know, Tyrion losing the trial, almost getting called guilty. He demands his right by trial by combat. Champions are selected, and now we finally get to see that culminate in this fateful battle between Oberyn Martell and the Mountain. And it fucking goes off. We don't get to see him fight at pretty much any point throughout the season. Obviously, he's a new character. But in the first immediate seconds of this fight, we get to see him show the fuck off.
yeah,
You know, he's doing flips. He's fighting with a spear. Not something we've really seen in the show before.
exactly right. It's his own, like, unique foreign kind of fighting style.
Yeah, it's
that we
that
haven't
Dornish kind of
seen.
style that we don't know much about.
Exactly.
So we don't know what to expect. He's fighting this massive fucking dude, and he's wearing light kind of leather armor, doing flips, fighting with a spear. We don't know what's going to happen at all.
And it's the most, I think it's probably the most tense scene in Game of Thrones history. Like, the stakes are higher than they could ever be. Tyrion's life, right? And we genuinely, like, as an audience, know that he could die in this moment, you know?
Yeah, it could go either way. The Mountain is fucking formidable.
Exactly. And we have this moment too with Oberyn, like, he's kind of showing off, he's playing with his food a little bit. And we feel like he's in control, but those cutaway shots of Tyrion as well, like, incredible acting.
Yeah,
like,
super tense.
He feels like his life is on the line in that moment, because it is. The speech that Oberyn gives as well is
Well, yeah.
throughout, like, it's building, like, every
way-
time he gets on top, he adds another layer to that cake. And
Well, that's the thing I love about this fight as well, is they construct it in such a way that you really don't know what's going to happen. There are moments of winning for Oberyn. There are moments of winning for the Mountain. Like, it feels like it could go either way at every single point until it looks like Oberyn has the upper hand, and then he gets a little bit carried away with it.
yeah, well, he stabs the Mountain with the poisonous blade. So right then and there, he knows he's won. He's dead. The poison will kill him, but he wants to publicly shame him.
Yeah.
He wants to take
And
on
Tywin Lannister.
Exactly right. Like, he has beef with the Lannisters. Tywin being the figurehead of that, he needs to make this public announcement, right?
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that leads to his downfall, because the Mountain, while laying on the ground, manages to whip his legs from underneath him
Yeah.
and gets on top of him. And look, I know Oberyn was a very progressive character. He's a bicon. He doesn't mind whether he's with a man or a woman. I'm sure quite a switch character. But in this moment, it was not good for him to be on the bottom.
No, not at all. They do some amazing visual work here with Oberyn getting his skull crushed. The Mountain, using his incredible strength, pushes down on Oberyn's eyes and literally explodes his head on the ground. And it sucks because they set him up. You love Oberyn. He's such an impressive character, and the fight is impressive on its own, but in that last moment where he feels like he's winning, he's kind of like showboating. He's Elia Martell, you raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children, admit it. You know, he's trying to get everyone, he's hyping up the crowd, he's distracted.
And Tyrion's watching, like, please, bro.
Please just end it, man. Like, this is not about you, but obviously it is for Oberyn. Like, he's agreed to do it because
the entire audience is like,
reasons.
please, just get it over with. Like,
every second, you know, the Mountain is injured. He's lying on the ground, but he finds a moment where Oberyn is literally, I think, pointing at Tywin or grandstanding or saying something as well, showboating, and knocks his leg out from under him. Literally, he falls, he hits the ground, and you know at that moment it's kind of fucked up. He loses teeth. He gets, like, punched a few times.
He gets one belt from the Mountain, and, like, his teeth spray over the fucking...
Everywhere. They go over the ground, and that was such a terrible visual as well, because you know at that moment it's not going to go well for him. And the scream from his wife. The reaction from Tyrion, the reaction from Tywin, where he gives, like, a slight fucking sly smirk. The reaction from Cersei, obviously,
Oh my
as well.
god.
And just I feel bad for Oberyn. I wanted him to succeed in that. Obviously, he does get a slight victory with the poison, but we don't know it at that point, and we feel like, once again, Game of Thrones has fucked us.
That final shot, too, where they're both lying there dead. Well, even though the mountain's not dead.
Just next to each other, side by side, with
Oberyn's
fucking head. Oh, I feel bad. I feel bad thinking about it, but it was such a well-constructed fight. It was very entertaining to watch and tense. It didn't go the way that you wanted it to, but, you know, Tywin was still publicly shamed. Oberyn got his moment where he felt like he had a bit of a victory. Unfortunately, his life was just cut short a little bit early.
Yeah.
And of course, that has bad implications for Tyrion, who has now lost his trial by combat. So it's kind of his last hope.
Like, look, the episode as a whole might not be like one of the elites of the elite, but that sequence is,
that moment,
I think it's maybe one of the most memorable moments for me.
I can almost imagine it visually, like right now, thinking back.
I haven't seen it in genuinely like 8 years.
Yeah, well,
no, I remember it nearly shot for shot.
Obviously, I rewatched the whole series more recently than you did earlier.
I haven't rewatched it, but I remember that shot. I remember like the sounds of the teeth spraying along the concrete.
Me too.
The popping of his head,
the screaming,
both screams, the cutaway shots of everyone watching. It's forever like etched into my memory. For anyone who ever argues that like violence is gratuitous, this is an example.
It serviced it well.
This is an example of how violence can add to story in terms of creating this incredibly shocking moment. And
it's gruesome, it's brutal, but it works so fucking well.
Yeah.
And I probably have to say, I think that is my favorite moment of season 4.
Yeah, look, that's fair.
Obviously, there's a lot of great moments with Tyrion and a lot of other characters within the season. Like, it is solid. Talking about this all with you now, you know, thinking about season 3 and 4, there's still a lot of great moments in 4. truly there is.
It's one of many, but it's definitely one of, for me, like the most memorable sequences of the entire show.
Yeah.
But we need to talk about the finale. One of my favorite finales of the entire series.
A little bit more climactic than other seasons.
Yeah. Where they've generally been that kind of like falling action, where it's like recovering from episode 9. Episode 9 was its own segregated thing.
Yeah, right. Like we didn't get to see any other plot points.
Exactly, it had its own conclusion. Yeah. This is the conclusion to seasons 4 and ties up a lot of season 3 stuff as well.
Yeah.
We've already touched on like a bit with like Dany and Jon, but with Tyrion in particular, like, so he gets freed by Varys.
Yeah, I believe Varys comes down. You know, he kind of betrayed him a little bit during the trial, unfortunately, but he's being pressed to do it.
Yeah.
He knows that Tyrion is going to be executed probably the next day, and he gets him out of the cell, and they have a very small window to get on a ship and escape the city.
Yeah.
After all of this has gone down.
But Tyrion can't just walk away.
No, not after everything that's happened this season, and especially with what happened with his father.
Yeah, so he goes to Tywin's room and makes one really shocking discovery to find that Shay is in his bed. Then all of a sudden to the audience, like, it makes sense. Like, Shay didn't come out of nowhere, right? She was there all along. That's a really fucked up thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the woman you love to get betrayed by her.
And thought that she loved you as well.
Yeah. And to be betrayed by her in front of everyone and then find out that, like, she's sleeping with your father.
Yeah.
Who hates you more than anything.
Extra fuck you on top of everything he's experienced this season.
It's super rough. And, like, for him to strangle her.
Yeah, like, in the way that he does.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant execution. And
I believe it's the necklace that he bought her, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. It's so incredibly cathartic. And Shay was like a character I never really overly liked, but always understood where Tyrion was coming from. It was just such a brutally painful moment for him. But we're not even done yet, because
he doesn't end there.
Because then he goes to the lavatory, right?
Yeah, he goes down to the John. Obviously, Tywin isn't in his room. He's killed Shay, he strangled her with the necklace that he gave her. Terribly cathartic, but he's already made this decision, right? So he heads down the old loo, where he finds his father, Tywin, sitting on the toilet reading a paper or something, and Tyrion's got Joffrey's crossbow, Joffrey's specific custom lion-made crossbow, and Tywin's like, oh, let's talk about this.
Yeah, look, I love how, like, being on the toilet taking a shit is about as vulnerable as you can get, right?
Yeah.
Even though Tywin is in this position with a crossbow pointed at him, knowing everything that's happened, like, he knows he's fucked, but he's not going to go down without a fight. Like, he's condemned his own son to death. He was actively rooting for it. All the betrayal, the stuff with Shay, like, everything comes together in this one scene. And even though he's on the toilet, he's still in command. of this scene. He's in command of every scene he's in, and even though he's in this vulnerable moment, he's still in control.
And that in part is compliment to Charles Dance as an actor as well.
Charles Dance, I like I said in the last episode of the podcast, I think he gives my favorite performance of the entire show. He is on another level to a lot of the actors here.
He really fits Tywin.
It's his magnum opus as an actor, I think. Like, he absolutely nails the character in a way that I don't think many people could. And then, like, Peter Dinklage as Tyrion, for me, is probably like the next best, probably the standout performance of the entire show.
So we get a culmination of these two
fucking behemoths coming together in a one room, small enclosed space. The entire like series and season and everything coming together to this one moment. They have their final showdown before Tyrion manages to muster the courage and murder his father. I think it's the best ending to any season of Game of Thrones.
It feels very like it wraps things up as a season end. I think at the start of that, Tywin's just trying to, he's like, I'd never let them kill you or something, you're my son and stuff like that. But by the end of that scene, he's fucking doubling down on it. He's like,
he pulls a Tyrion.
Yeah, for sure. He goes off, he kind of goes ham, and obviously it leads to the decision for Tyrion to shoot his father with the crossbow multiple times while he's on the privy. Who is currently the acting king, by the way. So Tyrion is committing crimes. He's doing it. Whether he was guilty before or not, he's always guilty in his father's eyes. He's guilty in the eyes of the rest of the city. But he is now actually killing people and being guilty at this point.
And then he gets away, and we get that big prelude to like he's going to go and join Dany, which is just like a huge exciting moment.
Crazy crossover like opportunities there. Sets up something great, but really closes that chapter on Tyrion's life in King's Landing and that point, which helps it feel like a really natural end to the season.
And season 4, like, it's the midway point of the series, right? We didn't know it at the time, but it ended up being that way. Season 4 just really works well as like, it feels like the end of a part of Game of Thrones. And then we start fresh again in season 5 with a lot of
much shit has happened. You know, like so much shit has ended, but it really
season 4 is fucking mental, man. It's so many plot points that go on, but absolutely incredible, and that final episode was just perfect. But let's move on. So let's talk about our favorite characters. So we've done our favorite characters for season 1 and 2. Now let's talk about purely in isolation, seasons 3 and 4. Who is your favorite character?
Okay, so obviously we've spoken about it a bit already if it's not clear. Season 3, my favorite character was Jaime. He became very likable. He had a very good arc. I think one of my favorite moments of season 3 was definitely his monologue and conversation with Brienne in the bath scene.
Yep.
He goes through a lot of shit. You feel for him, and you kind of grow to really like Jaime as a character. And I think he's probably at his best in season 3 before he makes questionable decisions in season 4.
Yeah, but even then, like, if you just take that one bad scene out, like even in season 4, he's incredible.
He's still strong, of course. He's helping people out.
The golden arm, and he's adapting to that new way of life, and the whole dynamic with Tyrion as well.
Moments with Tyrion, exactly. Moments with Bronn as well, and stuff like that. Bronn kind of shifts to being Jaime's guy in season 4 instead of Tyrion's guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, season 3 Jaime, I think, is where he's at his strongest. And then season 4, my favorite character would have to be Oberyn. He's introduced in season 4. He's not in it for very long, but he's immediately very
impactful cameo, right?
Yep, impactful character. He's amazingly charismatic. He's got such an interesting life, and he's lived such an interesting life, being kind of an older man who's like traveled the world and stuff like that. He's an incredible fighter. He's got a reason for being there. He still knows how to play the game, even though he's from a different place and hasn't spent a lot of his life in King's Landing, and he plays it well up until he's in that fight, and obviously a very tragic ending. His arc in the show plays out really well, and it kind of like
well-written character.
He's very well written. Every line he gives, there's a lot of beautiful moments, but for sure, even though he does die tragically, I feel like he does kind of fulfill what he needs to do within the story.
It's a tricky thing being thrown in like a crazy ensemble cast with so many lovable characters already.
Yeah, and obviously Pedro is like a household name, in this day and age, but at that time being relatively new. It
was his rise to fame, right?
He did an amazing job. Yeah,
it was incredible. Yeah, look, all great characters. Jaime too is like that season 3 moments, like where he goes to like an S tier character.
Yeah, for sure.
One of my favorite characters for sure. But I'll have to say, like, for seasons 3 and 4, combined, my favorite character is Tyrion. I have to say Tyrion. Look, he was probably my favorite in season 1 and 2, but just knowing how much better he gets, it was kind of hard to still say him like prematurely, right? Season 4, man, Tyrion just goes to another fucking level.
He's essentially the main character of season 4.
Game of Thrones is at its best when Tyrion is the main character of the show.
Fair.
And he's absolutely fucking incredible. Like the best performance of the entire series for me by Peter Dinklage, and so much character depth for me. Absolutely perfect. Couldn't have been done any better. And then just to throw in a couple of honorable mentions as well, like obviously Arya and the Hound, I love their arcs in conjunction. I think they're both fantastic. Jon, even though he's a bit of a basic bitch answer, like he is a fantastic character.
Yeah, he's still really good in season 3 and 4. It's probably where he's hits his stride and peaks as well for his character.
And I just got to say, like, special mention to Tywin. Every fucking scene he's in, I love it.
No, I'll give you that. Even from season 1, you know, Tywin's been great.
Yeah.
We've spoken about Charles Dance and how he does, but he's incredible. He gives an amazing performance. He's such a menacing, kind of smart character.
Yeah.
Even the scene where he's on the toilet, his final scene, obviously a bit shit for him. But
what a way to fucking end your career.
Yeah, you know, true.
For working for Game of Thrones.
But he does such a fucking good job all the time, every time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree with you completely on all of those.
Let's move on to our favorite episode. So look, last time we did just favorite episode for season 1 and 2 combined. And we only picked one. I think that's literally impossible
for these 2 seasons.
So we're gonna split it up into seasons. So do you want to start off with your season 3 favorite episode?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good moments throughout season 3. Like we said, a lot of them hit. I think probably my favorite episode overall in season 3 was episode 9, The Reigns of Castamere. Purely because that ending was one of the most shocking things I'd ever seen in television at that point in my life when I watched it. Didn't think it was something that could happen. Obviously, Robb was my favorite character. I believe I had a fucking Stark poster up in my room when I was a kid watching that stuff. It was, I loved the Starks. I love Robb. I love what he was doing. It was a bit of a slower season for him building up to that moment, but you just didn't expect it to happen. And the way they do it in the Red Wedding in that episode is shocking and tense and makes me anxious thinking about it.
It's a flawless episode.
Yeah.
There's so many little things as well going on. Like, for example, the song that plays.
Yeah, you've got the band that just starts playing The Reigns of Castamere and no one notices except for Catelyn. You know, you've got Talisa revealing that she's pregnant in that episode.
Yep.
Roose Bolton wearing the armor like underneath and being like, shh.
And who notices it? Was it Catelyn?
It's Catelyn. She lifts it up and she sees the armor in him and she knows that shit's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
There's little moments like when they close the gates, you know, when they stop letting people in, when they lock up the direwolf, things like that. There are small hints alluding to something. It builds tension and suspense and you feel like something bad is going to happen. And when it does go wrong, you're like, how are they going to make it out of here? Because that's what you want for your main characters. That's what you're like, how are they going to escape? How are they going to get out of it? But there's no fucking way. And it ends so tragically for some of the most, my favorite characters in the show and some of the best characters in the show as well. I think Robb died too soon. I think the North remembers and we'll never forget that happened to him. But yeah, for that reason being incredibly shocking and something I didn't expect to happen in the show, that is my favorite episode overall of season 3 and maybe one of my favorite episodes of the show.
I think too, it's probably the best directed episode in the whole history of Game of Thrones. Like, the execution, it couldn't have been better. Like, I can imagine like people reading this in the books and having an emotional like response, but like cinema and television is just a better medium for this kind of thing. And I think they fucking nailed it. Like
they did. It's perfect. Like it literally is a perfect sequence and a perfect episode.
That heartbreaking like Catelyn fucking cry where she's got that one of the daughters
she fights for it,
hostage and
knife to their throat. I will kill your daughter if you don't do it. And Walter's like, I don't fucking care, you can do it. She obviously does it. She gets that revenge after Robb dies. He gets that final like stab. You know, Talisa's dead. Robb knows that he's lost his wife, his child.
He just loses the will to live in that moment.
He stands up shocked. And he's literally crying for his mother. He's like, mother. And he gets stabbed that final time, bleeds out, dies on the ground. And then Catelyn, obviously, I think they cut the sound there for that moment as well, as she kills that daughter and then gets her throat cut herself. And we see her throat bleed out before she falls off the screen, and that's where they end.
And the extra heartbreak with Arya as well. Like,
finding out about that, seeing her brother, who she hasn't seen in years, have his body paraded around with his beloved direwolf's head on top. That's fucked up. That made me so angry, and it still makes me angry.
And the impact it actually has on the plot of the entire show. Like, one of the potential kings for the throne just gone.
The War of the Five Kings essentially ends with that episode.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's super well done. I can't pass it up as my favorite.
And it's rated 9.9 on IMDb, which is just fucking mind-blowing.
Super high. It's up there.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think season 3, like, it stands out a lot more than, say, other seasons might do with their episodes. Like, like season 4, there's like 4 episodes potentially that you could pick from, right? But season 3, it's an incredibly high quality season of television, but this episode is just on another level. Like,
it's like the quintessential Game of Thrones moment. I remember when it happened, everyone was fucking talking about it. You know, you had to have seen the episode right away to not get spoiled about that. I think it started a massive burst of reaction videos on YouTube. There were so many people from different walks of life reacting to that moment and that happening, and it was very popular for people to be doing that and watching that kind of content at that time, just because of how shocking it was and how it kind of changed TV at the time for doing something that was so unexpected in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best episodes in all of Game of Thrones.
For sure.
Incredible. And yeah, that was obviously my pick as well.
Yeah.
But moving on to season 4. Favorite episode of season 4.
Okay, season 4 had, you know, a lot of good moments. Like we said, there's those 4 at the end that are pretty fucking flawless.
Yeah.
I think it came through with the passion when I was talking about it before, that The Mountain and the Viper is my favorite episode.
Totally fair.
So yeah, The Mountain and the Viper would have to be my favorite episode. It's episode 8 in the season. It's just really well done. We've got some stuff with Theon that we mostly spoke about at the end of it, you know, kind of leading up to that. But there's preparations that are made and anxiety that's building around the wall as well. Theon as kind of coming back into his life as Theon, and
Dany finding out about Jorah.
Yep,
as well,
that happens there too, which is a culmination of Jorah's arc, which is a big moment.
It's crazy. Like, you'd think that the showrunners and the writers would be like, okay, there's so many big moments, let's kind of sprinkle them out. But literally, it feels like almost all of season 4 is just like massive plot point after massive plot point. And they just throw them all in this fucking... This episode in particular stands out as one of those for me, because we've got all these, like, the whole episode could have just been focused on Tyrion and this trial, right? And the trial by combat, and we could have had more of like a King's Landing focus.
Yeah, just like it does in the next episode with the Night's Watch.
Exactly, but no, they spread it out over a few episodes, and then we still keep this ensemble here in this episode, even though like Tyrion is obviously like, he's got the highest stakes. It's the most important arc that's happening in this episode. We're getting set up for the Watchers on the Wall with Jon. We're getting like a big plot moment that calls back to season 1 with Dany, Sansa protecting.
We get that incredible moment in the Eyrie. So after Littlefinger has killed Sansa's aunt, we get Sansa in a difficult position, having to defend Peter Baelish and actually showing what she's learned from Cersei, from Marjorie, from Littlefinger, lying to all the Lords of the Eyrie, and explaining like what went wrong, like how Peter Baelish essentially didn't kill Lysa Arryn. Yeah, it's a beautiful moment for her character, and though I don't love Sansa, I do enjoy Littlefinger. I've quite liked Peter Baelish as a character as well, and how conniving he is. So he's in this moment where he's kind of helpless in this situation. He's playing it kind of well, but it's really on Sansa to back him up in that moment. And whether it may be a mistake or not, it's impressive to see her do that. But obviously the culmination of the battle between the Mountain and
that's what we're all here for.
That's
why the episode.
That's beautiful. It's one of the best moments of the whole show, but definitely probably my favorite moment.
It's why the episode's called The Mountain and Viper.
That's true. That's true.
And look, that moment, like that ending, is the best, I think, final 5 minutes of a Game of Thrones episode for me.
For sure. Ends with such a fucking crazy bit.
Insane. Yeah, look, I don't disagree with you. I think that's a flawless episode, but there are multiple flawless episodes within season 4 for me. A personal favorite for me, like for what I look for in television, I'm all about character and writing. Those are the things that get me off, right? Episode 6, Laws of Gods and Men, Tyrion's trial, that ticks all my boxes. That's genuinely top 3 favorite episode for Game of Thrones history for me. I absolutely fucking adore it. And as you know, like Blackwater was my favorite in season 2 and season 1, like combined, that was my favorite of the first quarter. Like it's only fitting, like even more so than the Reigns of Casimir. I'm going this episode for my favorite of the second quarter.
That's fair.
Look, Tyrion's trial is, again, like the Reigns of Casimir, it's perfectly executed. It builds so perfectly. Like, we start off, okay, what's going to happen? Who's going to speak for Tyrion? We get these different characters come in. Some talk positively about him, some talk negatively about him. We get these callbacks with like him slapping Joffrey and how that's coming back to bite him in the bum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had those moments where we thought, it's funny, Tyrion slapping Joffrey, and now all of a sudden, holy shit, it might cost him his life.
Yeah, everything that he's done up until this point kind of comes back in this from the biased opinion of people who've been paid off by Tywin.
Yep.
You know, they're explaining it in a way that hurts his case, and it's beating Tyrion over the fucking head like constantly with all of this shit and everyone kind of betraying him and people that he thought he could trust and rely on, like Varys, like Shay, and it puts him in such a bad position where it feels so fucking good when he gives that monologue.
Yeah, and that twist from Shay like came out of fucking nowhere as well and just elevates it even further.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. I didn't expect it to come back at all.
In my opinion, it's like some of the best example of writing and performance coming hand in hand and just completely fucking hitting it out of the park. Aspects of that episode that we do forget about as well is like it's also a pretty big moment for Theon. It's when his sister Yara comes and they storm the Dreadfort to free him. Right, and she sees her brother for the first time and is like, he's just a fucking shell of his former self. Right?
In the cage with the dogs.
Anymore. Yeah, like that's another huge moment in the show that just gets completely overshadowed because of Tyrion's trial. And then, look, there are some aspects of the episode that like just pale in comparison to the rest. Like the stuff going on with Dany just does not matter in comparison.
The stuff going on with Stannis as well.
Yeah, I think that's when like they go to Braavos and make a deal with the Iron Bank.
It's cool. It's the first time we see Braavos, I believe, which is really kind of impressive.
It's to be fair, that's the only good scene that Stannis has in this season. Like his arc is really quite weak in season 4.
I don't know. He's got some good stuff later on when he comes with the mercenaries in episode 9 or 10, I believe. Like that's fucking cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's not super interesting. It's essentially, you know, watching him go to a finance meeting.
Yeah.
So that's not one of my favorite standout moments, but I don't have a lot of standout moments for Stannis apart from Blackwater.
Even though, like, there are moments of this episode that, like, aren't quite hitting it out of the park. Like, it's not like a standalone episode, like The Watchers on the Wall, right? But even still, like, the Tyrion stuff is so fucking good.
Yeah, I think you can forgive everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect episode for me, so.
You're such a Tyrion fan.
I am. Look, Tyrion, I think most people would agree, like, this is where Tyrion's character peaks in this season. And then it's just straight off a fucking cliff.
Look.
From here.
Look, I think the whole show kind of goes a bit off the cliff.
Yeah.
After this point.
And that's what I'm saying. Game of Thrones is at its best when Tyrion is the main character and shining.
Yeah.
Right? Blackwater is my favorite episode of seasons 1 and 2. And then this episode is my favorite for seasons 3 and 4.
Yeah.
This show, when Tyrion is going good, the show is healthy. When Tyrion's going bad, the show's not doing so great.
That's fair.
And that is why it is my favorite episode of season 4. But yes, let's move on to the moments that everyone's been waiting for, our final verdict. So let's start off with season 3. So if you had to rate season 3 out of 100, summarizing your thoughts, you mentioned earlier that it's your favorite season. What would you rate your favorite seasons of Game of Thrones out of 100?
So look, obviously rewatching the whole show recently, I kind of watched it in like a binge format where it's just kind of like a few episodes a night.
Did it get better or worse for you rewatching it, these two seasons?
Honestly, it'd been a while since I'd seen it, so...
Still felt fresh.
Yeah, like, there's not that shocking kind of moments, but like you said, I hadn't seen The Reigns of Castamere since it aired originally on the day that it aired. So watching that again, knowing what was coming, and watching out for all those little things that maybe I didn't notice the first time around, still had a lot of fucking amazing payoff for that. Some of the things felt a little bit flat, some of the things were great, but I think overall, season 3 hit really hard for me. You know, like we were talking about, a lot of the episodes were just high points. There was a lot of amazing moments throughout the entire season. Season 3, I would rate out of 100, probably a 95. What? It's high. It's up there.
Yeah.
It's
Why not? Where's those 5 points coming from? What stops you from giving it 100?
There are a few moments throughout, specifically, I think some stuff with Dany, and a few kind of like small moments throughout the season that kind of like hold it back. Like, yeah, so what prevents it from me giving it 100 is there are a few moments throughout the season that I don't think are stronger than some others. I don't think it's like it's well balanced. I don't think it's perfect.
Okay.
You know, you've got...
Oh, I agree.
There's some stuff like the Brotherhood without banners stuff is cool, but it's not as interesting as some of the other stuff. I don't think I appreciate the Hound and Arya stuff as much as you do. Well, I think we're coming to a point with Sansa where it's like getting a little bit repetitive, even though we're experiencing a few other things, which is why the King's Landing like switch up in season 4 was good, but it kind of like the stuff that we saw with Sansa wasn't super interesting, and it doesn't shine as well as some of the better moments for Dany, who had a bad season 2, and some of the amazing moments for Jon. Like, it just kind of felt in contrast of those, some of the stuff that we cut to with the lesser characters was a bit unimportant. Like, you spoke about Sam and Gilly and how much you appreciated their relationship. I don't care for it that much, I'll be honest. I don't love Sam that much. I don't love Gilly. I don't love baby Sam.
I love Gilly, don't worry, Gilly.
Okay.
Gilly,
you can tell Gilly. I
love you.
I don't think Sam should have been the one to kill a White Walker. I think it was a cool moment, but I don't think it was like entirely my favorite.
Oof.
You know, so while it's well balanced and there's a lot of beautiful moments, I think that some of the moments of the season, Reigns of Castamere, Jon stuff, some Dany stuff, completely outshine some of the lesser moments.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that prevents me from giving it a perfect rating.
Look, that's fair. I agree with you. Like, Bran stuff is a bit of a detour that I'm not overly happy with.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I'm like you, maybe didn't like Dany's stuff quite as much. I definitely think it's a huge improvement over season 2, but I do prefer the more conflicts that she has in season 4 compared to season 3.
I do just disagree with that. I do think that her rise to power is more interesting than her dealing with the stuff. There's obviously a lot of great political conflict with that in season 4, but I do just think that it's more interesting visually and from a storytelling perspective to see her coming from that lower point in season 2, rising up and gaining that army and all of that kind of like power for her.
Yeah, look, that's fair. I personally disagree, but that's not to say that I don't love what's happening in season 3. Like I said, it's still a fantastic arc. I do have problems with season 3, but with all of that being said, I rate this 100.
Whoa.
I think season 3, it's not perfect. Perfect and 100 don't necessarily correlate. I think it's pretty much impossible, especially in an ensemble show like this, right? It's impossible to have perfection throughout an entire season. But this is as close as you can fucking get. It is incredibly consistent throughout. There's not a bad episode here at all. There's no moments where like half the episode feels like we're treading water like some of season 2 did. When it gets going, like some of the best moments in season 3 are incredible. Obviously,
it gets fucking going.
The Reigns of Castamere and the implications that it has for the story world. I like Jon's arc a lot, but the Jaime stuff with Brienne it's where the show really cares about character and writing and performance more so than later seasons. And when I remember like the good old times of Game of Thrones, I'm thinking about these 2 seasons. And for me, like, you have like the Chaos is a Ladder monologue in season 3. Every fucking scene is quality. There's no bad scenes, you know. Even
no, I wouldn't say bad scenes, just some less interesting.
Exactly, like the bad scenes are like 6 out of 10s, you know,
exactly.
And they're so infrequent, and you're getting so many like incredible scene after scene, arc after arc, character moment, character development. We're getting set up, we're getting payoff. It fucking nails the comedy aspects as well without overplaying the hand. We have the emotional drama, we have the political intrigue, we have the action sequences. It fucking ticks all the boxes for me, and that's why I give it 100 out of 100.
It really does peak the show. I know we spoke about it at the start as well, but you get to see what they were held back for in seasons 1 and 2 with having to improve their writing and limit what they can show visually with battles, and their CGI and their visual effects and things like that really kind of culminates here in season 3 and 4, where you get still that fantastic fucking writing as well as the addition of some incredibly powerful visual moments as well.
That's totally fair. Yeah, so what about season 4?
Season 4 was still entertaining for me to watch. I do think though that it was a little bit less entertaining for me than season 3. I think season 3 had a lot of high moments, but season 4 had a lot of other stuff that I wasn't super interested in. Specifically, Dany's story is a little bit weaker for me this season. Still interesting, but it does kind of meander a bit. You know, she stays in the same city, she stays stationary, she has a lot of stuff to deal with, but you know, I fucking love dragons. I want to see dragons. So locking up the dragons and Drogon flying away for half the season kind of like lessens her impact there.
Fair enough.
Jon, I think, was at his best when he was experiencing the free folk and the wildlings and that kind of arc and journey he went through comes to a head, climax, and ends really well in season 3. Season 4, he's kind of like getting fucked around by the Night's Watch. You know, he's like trying to tell them these things, and it's really frustrating to watch.
Yeah, that's fun.
And it kind of annoys me as a viewer, like watching that. Obviously, there's an amazing 4 episodes I think we saw towards the end. I love the payoff with Joffrey and everything that happens to him, but it just didn't hit as well for me. There was a lot of stuff that I wasn't super interested in, some of it being the Sansa stuff, some of it being questionable decisions that Jaime made. Yeah, it wasn't as solid for me as season 3 was. But that being said, I still think it is one of the best seasons of Game of Thrones for some of the moments that it does have, and those 4 consistent episodes towards the end of the season. So I'll probably give season 4 90 out of 100.
Oh.
So pretty close, but less than season 3.
So season 3 is your favorite. It's still a very high rating, to be fair. I think.
Yeah, it's still a solid season, don't get me wrong. I just think compared to season 3, doesn't hit as well as it did.
Look, I completely understand your shortcomings with the season. Again, season 4 is not a perfect season. There are problems. The Jaime rape scene does bother me. It's such a small like part of the show that it's easy to just forgive and overlook. But it is like the first really, really bad moment I think in Game of Thrones to date.
Mm-hmm.
And like some of the brand stuff isn't overly interesting in season 4. I think season 4 is a bit better than 3 with that regard. There are like moments and arcs and stuff that aren't quite as strong, but season 4 is a season that has the Lion and the Rose where Joffrey is murdered.
Mm-hmm.
It's a season that has the Laws of Gods and Men, which I've already mentioned is up there with one of my favorites in Game of Thrones, right? Then we have the Mountain and the Viper, and then the Watchers on the Wall, and the Children back to back to back. The best 3-episode run in Game of Thrones history. No one can argue that.
I won't argue.
You will lose if you do. Genuinely, half the fucking season are masterpieces, right? Like flawless 10 out of 10 episodes, and the rest are still like 8s and 9s. And for me, I'm bad at math, so I ignore averages. This is 100 again.
Another 100.
This is another 100.
So season 3 and 4 is on the same level for you.
Well, no, because season 4 is a high 100 for me. I think I think they both max out, right? They are both masterful seasons of television for me. Season 3, I think, has a higher like floor, whereas there's maybe not quite as many bad moments as season 4 has. Mentioning specifically like that Jaime Cersei scene. Season 3 is incredibly consistent and has the ultra high highs as well. But season 4 has more higher highs than season 3 has. Like the Reigns of Castamere is the standout. Yeah. Season 4 has 5 Reigns of Castameres. Right?
That's fair. Look, yeah, Reigns of Castamere does kind of overshadow some of the lesser moments of season 3. So I do understand where you're coming from with that. Like when people think about season 3, they think about Reigns of Castamere and kind of let some of the cooler plot points like the Jon stuff fall to the wayside a little bit.
Yeah.
When you think about season 4, I do suppose that a lot of those high moments are all memorable in their own right.
If you were to think about your favorite or the best moments of Game of Thrones, your favorite scenes, your favorite lines of dialogue, your favorite dialogue exchanges, your favorite character moments, your favorite shocking moments, your favorite action sequences, I guarantee you that list is dominated by season 4, right? It has so fucking much going on. It is an absolute masterpiece of television. And we didn't even mention too, like season 4 has so much going on. The Tyrion stuff dominates. But also too, like the Arya and the Hound.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's so many good things to talk about. We forget the culmination of 2 seasons of Arya's arc, which is absolutely incredible, right? Brienne and the Hound come head to head. They're 2 very like big brutish characters that are quite similar, but also opposites in a sense as well. They come together with Podrick as well. They have this awesome fucking showdown. Like it's
a cool fight. It's one of the location.
It's one of the best fights, because it's okay. They start off.
It's raw.
They start off with fucking swords, and then they get on their fucking hands and knees. And Brienne, unexpectedly, in my opinion, come out on top over the Hound.
Yeah.
And then Arya to leave the Hound for dead to kind of almost fulfill her own character arc, right? Even though there is that mutual respect, she's a fucking cold-hearted assassin.
She still has, he's on her list.
Yeah.
She's gonna do that. It sets her up perfectly for what is supposed to come later for Arya's arc. Like, it gives you that kind of intrigue for what will come after that point. You know, Brienne's kind of failed to get Arya, has kind of failed to get Sansa. She's at this point where she's doing her own thing. The Hound is left for dead.
Yep.
And then Arya is set to go do something which she's been doing since season 2 and 3,
Yep.
which is head off to the east and kind of begin her training as a faceless man.
The reason why, like, ultimately when it comes down to it, season 4, the reason why it's my favorite season and the best season of Game of Thrones in my opinion, and not only that, like, one of the best seasons of television history ever. The main thing that stands out, like, there's a ton of reasons to pick and choose from, but it works as both a conclusion to the first half of Game of Thrones, while also setting up the second half of Game of Thrones. It does it absolutely perfectly. It ties up a lot of arcs, but opens up a whole new branch.
Yeah.
And look, while seasons 5 through 8 don't deliver on that setup, you can't deny how fucking perfectly season 4 just sets the show in motion. It concludes, but it sets up. I don't think it could be any better. Like, there's moments I don't like, but it is a absolute masterpiece of television for me, and it's why it's my favorite season of all time.
That's fair. That's fair. It's honestly hard to think about how seasons 5 to 8 kind of screwed things up with how well things were set up in season 4.
Yeah. And look, so I gave them both 100, so my average weighted for this quarter of Game of Thrones is a 100 out of 100. But I am interested to see. So you gave season 3 a 95, season 4 a 90. If you had to pick between those two figures and rate this quarter of Game of Thrones to compare it to future quarters and the previous episode we did, what are you leaning to? 90 or 95?
I'd probably bring it up. I'd say 95 as an average. You know, like you were talking about just then, you kind of convinced me a little bit on some of those moments. I still think season 3 is higher for me, but some of those season 4 moments are super worth it, and there are a lot of highs in it. So leaning together for this quarter of it, 95.
Yeah,
we'll go for 95.
Totally fair. And look, like the fact we're 195 out of 200 between us, it's a pretty
good.
It's a pretty fair indication about,
shows you what we think of this quarter.
Yeah, like
specifically
these 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. Forget the Game of Thrones universe. This is the peak of television. Television drama does not get any better than these 2 seasons. It nails absolutely every element of a show that you want. The ensemble balancing, the writing, the direction, the acting, the action sequences, the production value. What I really appreciate too is while it fucking nails the climaxes, and there's so fucking many, right? It also nails the little moments.
Yeah.
It cares about the little moments.
Those small character moments, those intricate dialogue pieces, you know, there's so much to love in these
So
2
much
seasons.
care went into these seasons, and it's kind of heartbreaking to see how the show ends up. Like,
what became of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, this is where it was going. If it could have fucking maintained this, like, we would have got something truly special, but
they had a formula that was working for 2 years, for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
You know, and then we spoke a lot about setup and payoff in this episode, in this podcast. And I think it's important to note that setup and payoff doesn't always work in Game of Thrones when it comes to looking at the first half of the show to the second half of the show.
Exactly. And look, like I said, season 4 does feel like a conclusion to the first half of Game of Thrones. And in our next episode, we will discuss seasons 5 and 6. Look, it's obviously, I think, where the show peaks in season 4 and we begin that slow descent down. But look, we're going to save that for another episode. If you've watched so far, please let us know, what would you rate these 2 seasons out of 100 in the comment section below. What's your favorite episodes, favorite characters? Love to hear all of your thoughts. But thank you so much for joining me, Luke.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me. I honestly love talking about these 2 seasons. Beautiful television, and I love hearing your thoughts about it as well.
It's all downhill from here.
It is. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about seasons 5 and 6.
Yep, can't wait to be miserable. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This has been For the Record. I'll see you in the next video.